They say freedom can't be bought or sold, but in 1878, Montana, they were damn well trying. A young woman stood on an auction block, bound and broken, while men shouted prices like she was livestock. Her name was Nora Caldwell, and she was about to become property until a cowboy with ice blue eyes rode into that dusty square and spoke 6 words that changed everything. She belongs only to herself. This is their story. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels across the world. The sun beat down on Silver Creek like God's own hammer, turning the Montana earth to dust and the air to something you could chew. It was the kind of heat that made men mean and dogs hide under porches, the kind that wrung every drop of mercy from the world and left nothing but bone and grit behind. The town square, if you could call it that, was nothing more than a wide spot in the dirt road where the general store faced the saloon and the livery stable slumped between them like a drunk trying to stand straight. 50, maybe 60 people had gathered there that August afternoon, and not a one of them had come for anything decent. Nora Caldwell stood on a platform of raw pine boards that still wept sap in the heat, her wrists bound with rough hemp that had already rubbed her skin bloody. She was 23 years old, though she felt ancient just then, every year of her life pressing down on her shoulders like stones. Her calico dress, once blue, now more the color of old bruises, hung torn at the shoulder where rough hands had grabbed her during the raid. Her dark hair, usually pinned up neat and proper like her mother had taught her, fell in tangles around a face that was smudged with trail dust and tracked with the dried salt of tears she'd stopped shedding hours ago. There were no more tears left. There was nothing left but a hollow place where hope used to live. The auctioneer was a weasel of a man named Silas Pitch, with tobacco-stained teeth and breath that could knock a buzzard off a gut wagon. He stood beside her on that platform, one hand gripping her upper arm hard enough to bruise, the other gesturing grandly to the crowd like he was selling prime horseflesh instead of a human being. "Gentlemen, gentlemen," his voice carried across the square, oily and pleased with itself. "What we got here is a fine specimen of womanhood. Young, strong, educated. Yes, that's right. She can read and write. Comes from good Eastern stock, not some prairie trash. Hell, with looks like these, she could warm your bed at night and teach your brats their letters come morning." Laughter rippled through the crowd, coarse, ugly laughter that made Nora's skin crawl. She kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, on the line where the hard blue sky met the harder mountains, and tried to pretend she was anywhere else. Back in Philadelphia with her mother, sitting in their sunny parlor with tea and books. Or with her father before the fever took him, watching him work in his study, the scratch of his pen the only sound in the peaceful quiet. Or even just last week, riding in the stagecoach with Uncle Thomas, arguing about whether she should accept that teaching position in Helena or hold out for something in Virginia City. But Uncle Thomas was dead now, shot through the chest when the Barrett gang hit their coach 3 days out from Boulder Creek. The driver and guard were dead too, their bodies left for the coyotes while the bandits took everything, the strongbox, the luggage, the horses, and Nora herself. She'd screamed then, fought until one of them backhanded her hard enough to make her ears ring and her vision swim with stars. After that she'd gone quiet, saving her strength, waiting for a chance that never came. They dragged her to Silver Creek, passing her from camp to camp, hand to hand, like a bottle of whiskey or a winning poker hand. And now here she stood, the last thing they hadn't stolen yet, about to be sold to the highest bidder. "Now, I know what some of you are thinking," Silas continued, warming to his pitch. "You're thinking, Silas, this seems a mite irregular. And maybe it is. But the way I see it, this here woman's got no papers, no family, no prospects. The Barrett boys found her wandering the prairie after Indians, or maybe it was Mormons, accounts differ, attacked her people. They saved her life, fed her, clothed her, brought her to civilization. Seems only fair they should recoup their investment, don't it?" It was all lies, of course. Every word a lie, built on lies, wrapped in more lies. But nobody in that crowd cared about the truth. Nora could see it in their faces, the hungry eyes, the wet lips, the way they looked at her like she was a piece of meat and they were starving dogs. There were cowboys who'd spent months on the trail, miners flush with gold dust and desperate for female company, ranchers whose wives had died or left them, trappers who lived alone in the mountains with only their own thoughts for company until those thoughts turned strange and dark. And there, In the front row stood the worst of them, Jack Barrett himself. The man who'd killed her uncle, the man who'd given the order to take her. He was big, barrel-chested, with a beard that looked like something had died in it, and eyes like dirty ice. He wore 2 pistols, tied down low, and a smile that had nothing to do with happiness. $50, someone shouted from the back. 50, for the girl. Silas grinned, showing those terrible teeth. Now we're talking. $50, gentlemen. Do I hear 60? 60, called a man in a battered top hat, probably a gambler down on his luck. 65, countered a grizzled prospector. Nora closed her eyes. This was it then. This was how the story ended, not with poetry and romance like in the novels she'd loved, but with dollars and cents, with rough hands and rougher nights ahead. She thought about throwing herself off the platform, breaking her neck on the hard ground, but her legs wouldn't obey. Some stubborn part of her refused to give up, refused to let them have even that final choice. $75. The voice was new, younger, eager. 75, and that's my last penny. 80. Barrett's voice cut through the others like a knife through butter. He hadn't spoken before, content to watch and wait, but now he stepped forward, and the crowd parted before him like the Red Sea before Moses. $80, and I'll kill any man who bids higher. The square went quiet. You could hear the wind rattling through the spaces between buildings, hear a dog barking somewhere distant, hear the creak of the saloon sign swinging on its rusty hinges. Silas licked his lips nervously, glancing at Barrett, then at the crowd, calculating his odds. Well now, Mr. Barrett, that's a fine bid indeed, he said carefully. Going once, 100. The voice came from the edge of the square, quiet but carrying, and every head turned to see who was fool enough to challenge Barrett. Nora opened her eyes, squinting against the sun, trying to make out the speaker. He sat on a horse, a big bay gelding with intelligent eyes, at the corner where the general store met the alley. The sun was behind him, turning him into a silhouette, a dark shape against the bright afternoon. But as he moved forward, walking the horse slowly into the square, details emerged like a photograph developing. He was tall, lean, built like a man who worked for his living rather than taking what he wanted from others. He wore dark pants tucked into scuffed boots, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows showing forearms burned brown by sun and corded with muscle, and a black vest that had seen better days. A gray Stetson sat low on his head, shading his face, but Nora could see his jaw, strong, clean-shaven, set in a hard line. At his hip rode a Colt revolver in a worn holster that showed the kind of use that came from practice, not show. But it was his eyes that held her. Ice blue, sharp as broken glass, and looking right at her with an expression she couldn't read. Not hungry like the others, not cruel like Barrett, something else entirely. "I'm sorry," Silas said, his voice cracking slightly. "Did you say $100? "I did." The stranger stopped his horse 10 feet from the platform. "But before we go any further, I'd like to know something." "What's that?" Silas glanced nervously at Barrett, who stood frozen, hand hovering near his gun. "Does she have papers?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Silas cleared his throat. "Papers? Well, we got a bill of sale from, not from you, from her." The stranger's gaze never left Nora's face. "Are you a slave, miss?" The question was so unexpected that Nora found her voice before she'd consciously decided to speak. No, I'm free. I was..." Her voice cracked. "They killed my uncle. They took me. This is kidnapping." The word fell into the square like a stone into still water, ripples spreading outward. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable now. Men who'd been ready to bid suddenly finding their boots very interesting. It was one thing to buy a woman at auction, to tell yourself she was property, a commodity, something between a horse and a wife. It was another thing entirely to hear that word, kidnapping, spoken out loud in broad daylight. Barrett's face darkened. The girl's confused, traumatized, doesn't know what she's saying. "She sounds pretty clear to me." The stranger swung down from his horse with the easy grace of someone who'd spent more time in the saddle than out of it. He was even taller than Nora had thought, topping 6 feet easily, and now that he was closer she could see the scars, one along his jawline, another disappearing under his collar. Marks of a hard life lived hard. "Who the hell are you?" Barrett demanded. "Name's Cole Anders. I ranch about half a day west of here." He said it casually, like they were being introduced at a church social instead of facing off in a dusty square with a kidnapped woman between them. "Never heard of you," Barrett said dismissively. "That's a shame. I've heard of you." Cole's voice stayed level, conversational, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "Jack Barrett. Ran with the plumber gang up in Virginia City until they stretched Plummer's neck. Moved south, set up your own operation. Mostly robbery, some rustling, bit of murder when the mood strikes. Am I close?" Barrett's hand dropped to his gun. "You calling me a criminal?" "I'm stating facts. And here's another fact." Cole turned to address the crowd now, his voice carrying clear and strong. "This woman was kidnapped. Her uncle was murdered. If any of you participate in this auction, you're accessories to those crimes. Now, I'm not a lawman, but I know Sheriff Hendricks over in Boulder Creek, and he takes a dim view of this kind of thing. So does Judge Blackwell. And between you and me, I'd rather face Barrett here than explain to the judge why I thought human trafficking was a reasonable investment." The crowd shuffled, muttered, began to drift apart like fog burning off in sunlight. The prospector spat tobacco juice and walked away. The gambler suddenly remembered an appointment elsewhere. Within moments, the eager bidders had dwindled to Barrett and his men. 5 of them, Nora counted, all armed, all watching Cole with the focused attention of predators sizing up potential prey. Silas held up his hands. "Now look here, mister, I don't want no trouble. This was all legal and proper." "This was a crime scene," Cole interrupted. "And you were the master of ceremonies. Congratulations." He looked at Barrett. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to untie this woman. I'm going to take her someplace safe. And then we're all going to ride to Boulder Creek and sort this out with proper authorities." "Sound good?" Barrett laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You got sand, I'll give you that. But you're 1 man against 6. 5, Cole corrected. "Your man on the far left is about to pass out from heat stroke. Look at him. He's swaying like a drunk in a windstorm." Everyone looked. Sure enough, one of Barrett's men, a heavy fellow in a wool coat unsuited to the weather, was pale and sweating, gripping the hitching post for support. "Besides," Cole continued, "I'm not alone." He nodded toward the roof of the general store. Nora looked up and saw a man there, old but steady, holding a rifle trained on Barrett. He wore the faded blue uniform trousers of a cavalry soldier, and his dark face was grim with purpose. "That's Eli Freeman," Cole said. "Served with the 10th Cavalry, Buffalo Soldiers, best shot in Montana Territory. And before you think about your odds, know that Eli was a sniper. He can put a bullet through a silver dollar at 200 yards. Your head's a lot bigger than a silver dollar, Jack." Barrett's jaw worked, his face reddening. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the wind and that distant dog and the rasp of Barrett's breathing. Nora could feel the tension like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. Then Cole did something that surprised everyone. He smiled, not a cocky smile, not a challenging smile, but something sadder and older. He looked at Nora again, really looked at her, and spoke directly to her for the first time since he'd ridden into the square. "Miss, I don't know your name. I don't know your story except for the little I've heard today. But I know this. You're not merchandise. You're not livestock. You're a human being with rights and dignity. And what's happening here is wrong, dead wrong. Now I'm going to make you an offer, and it's a real offer, not like what these men are doing. Will you let me help you?" His voice was gentle, but more than that, it was respectful. He was asking, not demanding, giving her a choice when everyone else had tried to take all her choices away. Nora felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she'd built to survive the last 3 days, and suddenly she could breathe again. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes, please." Cole nodded once, sharp and decisive. Without taking his eyes off Barrett, he drew his revolver, smooth, practiced, fast enough that Nora barely saw the movement. "Silas, untie her, now! But Mr. Barrett will be explaining himself to a judge soon enough. The ropes, now!" Silas fumbled with the knots, his hands shaking. When the ropes fell away, Nora's arms dropped, and pain shot through her shoulders as blood rushed back into her hands. She swayed, and Cole was there, steadying her with his free hand while keeping the gun trained on Barrett. Easy, he murmured. You've been through hell. Take your time. But Barrett wasn't finished. You're making a mistake, Anders. That woman's mine. I claimed her fair and square from those Indians. There were no Indians, Nora said, her voice shaking but firm. You killed my uncle. You shot him while he begged for mercy. I watched him die. And then you and your men... She couldn't finish, but she didn't have to. The truth was written in her torn dress, her bruised face, her haunted eyes. Barrett's hand twitched toward his gun. Don't. Cole's voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. I'm giving you a chance here, Jack. Walk away. Live to be stupid another day. But if your hand moves another inch toward that iron, Eli's going to punch your ticket, and we're going to have paperwork to fill out. And it's going to be a whole thing. Nobody wants that. You can't protect her forever, Barrett snarled. Don't have to. Just have to protect her long enough. Cole glanced at Nora. Can you ride? Yes. I think so. Good. That's my horse there, Ranger. He's gentle, smarter than most people. You're going to climb up, and we're going to walk out of here nice and slow. Eli's going to cover us from the roof until we're clear. Anyone follows us, anyone takes a shot, and Eli starts dropping bodies. Everyone understand? No one answered, but no one moved either. Cole helped Nora toward his horse, walking backward, keeping his gun and his attention on Barrett and his men. Ranger stood perfectly still as Nora pulled herself into the saddle, her muscles screaming protest. The world swayed, and she gripped the saddle horn hard. Cole mounted behind her, one arm coming around her waist to hold her steady, the other still holding his revolver. Eli, he called softly. I got you, came the reply from the roof, that deep voice calm as Sunday morning. They walked out of the square slowly, Ranger's hooves clopping on the hard ground, every eye following them. Nora expected a shot, a shout, something, but nothing came. They reached the edge of town, past the last building, and still nothing. The tension in Cole's body eased slightly, but he didn't holster his weapon. It wasn't until they were a quarter-mile out, the town shrinking behind them, that Eli caught up on his own horse, a dappled mare named Sadie who looked as old and steady as he did. The man was in his 60s, Nora guessed, with gray threading his close-cropped hair and a face seamed with smile lines around his eyes, though he wasn't smiling now. That went better than expected, Eli said dryly. Did it? Cole finally holstered his gun. I figured we'd be dodging bullets by now. Barrett's not stupid. He knows we'd testify against him. Killing us would bring every lawman in the territory down on his head. Eli looked at Nora, his expression softening. You all right, miss? Nora tried to find the right word and failed. She settled for, I'm alive. That's a start, Eli said gently. We'll work on the rest. They rode in silence for a while, leaving Silver Creek far behind. The sun began its slow descent toward the mountains, turning them purple and gold. The land around them was beautiful in that harsh, empty way that Montana had, rolling prairie dotted with sage, cut by dry creek beds, stretching out forever under a sky so big it made you feel small and infinite at the same time. Nora realized she was shaking, not from cold or fear, but from the aftermath of terror, from relief and exhaustion, and the sudden dizzying reality that she was safe. Or safer, anyway. Cole's arm around her waist was warm and solid, an anchor in a world that had been trying to drown her. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. I should thank you. I should say something, but I don't have words. Don't need words, Cole said. His voice rumbled through his chest into her back. You've been through enough. You don't owe me gratitude or explanations or anything else. But you saved me. You risked your life. I did what any decent person should do. He paused. What's your name? Your real name? Nora Caldwell. I'm from Philadelphia. She took a shaky breath. I was traveling to Montana Territory to take a teaching position. My uncle was escorting me. We were attacked 3 days ago on the Boulder Creek Road. They killed him. They killed everyone except me. And then they tried to sell you. Yes. Cole's arm tightened around her waist briefly, almost reflexively, then loosened. I'm sorry about your uncle. I'm sorry about all of it. But Nora Caldwell from Philadelphia, you're safe now. Or as safe as anyone can be out here. I'm taking you to my ranch. It's called the AAA, about 4 hours west. You'll have a room, a lock on your door, and time to figure out what you want to do next. Eli lives there too. We're not much for company, but we're honest men, and we'll treat you with respect. That's a promise.
Why?
The question came out before Nora could stop it. Why would you do this for a stranger? She felt Cole tense behind her, felt him choose his words carefully. 3 years ago, he said finally, his voice gone rough, my sister Annie was taken by slavers posing as missionaries. By the time I tracked them down, by the time I found her, he stopped, started again. I was too late. Too late to save her. Too late for anything but vengeance, and vengeance don't bring anyone back. So I made myself a promise that day. If I ever got another chance, if I ever saw someone else in trouble like that, I wouldn't be too late. Not ever again. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with old grief. Nora understood then. This wasn't just about her. This was about a sister named Annie who died before her time. This was about a man trying to save someone, anyone, because he couldn't save the one person who'd mattered most. I'm sorry, Nora whispered. About your sister. Me too. They rode on as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and red, like the world was on fire and they were riding through the flames toward something better. Toward hope, maybe. Toward the chance at a future that didn't include ropes and auction blocks and men with hungry eyes. Nora let herself lean back into Cole's chest, just slightly, and felt him adjust to support her weight. Eli rode beside them, vigilant, his rifle across his saddle. And for the first time since the stagecoach attack, since her world had turned to blood and screaming, Nora allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was going to survive this. Maybe she was going to do more than survive. Maybe she was going to live. The AAA ranch came into view as twilight painted the valley in shades of purple and gray. It sat in a natural bowl between two gentle ridges, sheltered from the worst winds, with a creek running along its southern border and a stand of cottonwoods providing shade and coolness. The ranch house was modest, logs chinked with mud and moss, a stone chimney rising from one end, a covered porch wrapping around the front. The barn was bigger than the house, well-maintained, with a corral nearby where half a dozen horses lifted their heads to watch the riders approach. Home, Cole said simply. It didn't look like much compared to the stately houses of Philadelphia, but to Nora, it looked like paradise. It looked like safety. It looked like the first place in days where she might close her eyes without fear of never opening them again. Eli helped her dismount while Cole tended to the horses. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, but Eli's strong hand steadied her. Easy now. You've been riding hard on an empty stomach. We'll get some food in you, get you cleaned up, get you rested. Everything else can wait. Inside, the house was simple, but clean. One main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Doorways led to what Nora assumed were bedrooms. The furniture was handmade but sturdy, a table with 6 chairs, a rocking chair near the fireplace, shelves holding books and supplies. That door there, Cole said, pointing, that's my room. Eli's is across the hall. The third bedroom, he gestured to a door on the opposite side of the main room. That's yours now. There's a lock on the inside, and I'm the only one with a key to the outside, which I'm giving you right now. He produced a small iron key and pressed it into her palm. Your room, your space. Your choice who comes in and when. Nora stared at the key, at this small piece of metal that represented autonomy and safety, and felt tears prick her eyes for the first time since the auction block. Thank you, she managed. There's a basin and pitcher for washing, clean clothes that belong to Annie. His voice caught on the name. They should fit you well enough. Tomorrow Eli can ride into Boulder Creek and get you proper things, whatever you need. For tonight, just rest. You're safe here, Nora. I give you my word. I believe you, she said, and realized with surprise that she did. Eli prepared a simple supper, beans and cornbread and coffee, strong enough to float a horseshoe. Nora ate mechanically, not tasting anything, her body demanding fuel even as her mind spun in circles. The two men ate in companionable silence, not pressing her with questions, not demanding conversation. It was Eli who finally spoke, his voice gentle. "Miss Caldwell, I know you've been through hell itself. I know you're probably thinking about your uncle, about what comes next, about 1,000 things. But right now, the only thing that matters is rest. Tomorrow, the world will still be here and you'll be stronger to face it. Tonight, you sleep, safe and sound. We'll keep watch." "I don't want to be a burden," Nora said automatically. "You're not," Cole said firmly. "You're a guest. More than that, you're someone who deserves help, and we're in a position to give it. No burden in that, just human decency." After the meal, Nora excused herself to her new room. It was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a dresser with the promised basin and pitcher, a small mirror on the wall. A window looked out over the creek and the darkening mountains beyond. Cole had been right about the clothes. A simple dress in blue calico, petticoats, a nightgown. They smelled of lavender and something else, something sad. These were a dead woman's clothes, worn by a sister who'd been taken too soon. Nora washed as best she could with the cold water, scrubbing away days of trail dust and terror. She examined herself in the mirror. Bruises on her arms where hands had gripped too hard, a cut on her cheek, eyes that looked haunted and old, but alive. Impossibly, incredibly alive. She pulled on the nightgown and crawled into bed, locking the door first, clutching the key like a talisman. The mattress was straw-stuffed but comfortable, the quilt soft and warm. Through the wall, she could hear the low murmur of masculine voices, Cole and Eli discussing the day, making plans, just existing in their easy friendship. Outside, a coyote called, high and lonesome. Another answered. The creek burbled over stones. The horses snorted and shifted in the barn. The normal sounds of a ranch at night, sounds that meant order and routine and safety. Nora closed her eyes and, for the first time in 3 days, slept without nightmares. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was, and panic seized her. Then she saw the blue calico dress hanging on a peg, saw the locked door, and remembered. The AAA ranch, Cole Anders, Eli Freeman, safety. She dressed quickly and emerged to find both men at the table, Eli cooking at the stove, Cole cleaning his rifle with practiced efficiency. They both looked up when she entered. "Morning," Cole said. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I thought possible." "Good. Coffee?" The morning passed in simple activities. Nora helped Eli with breakfast, finding comfort in the routine of cooking, in the familiar motions of setting a table and cleaning up after. Cole announced he was riding fence on the north pasture and would be gone most of the day. He offered to stay if Nora preferred, but she shook her head. "I'll be fine, I think. I need to learn how to be fine again." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Eli will be here if you need anything. There's books on the shelf if you want to read. The creek's nice for sitting by. And Nora..." He paused at the door. "You don't have to be fine. Not yet. Give yourself time." After he left, Eli showed her around the property. The barn held 6 horses, all well cared for. There were chickens in a coop, a vegetable garden that needed weeding, a root cellar stocked with supplies. It was a working ranch, modest but thriving, the product of hard labor and careful management. Cole built most of this himself, Eli told her. Came out here 5 years ago with nothing but his horse and a saddle. Bought the land cheap. It was considered too isolated, too close to Blackfoot territory. But he saw what it could be. Worked from dawn to dark, barely slept, just built and built. After Annie died, he worked even harder. Like if he stopped moving, the grief would catch him. "How did you meet him?" Nora asked. "I was passing through, looking for ranch work. Most places wouldn't hire an old Negro soldier, even one who'd fought for the Union. But Cole, he just asked if I knew horses and if I could shoot. I said yes to both. He hired me on the spot. No questions about my skin or my age. That was 3 years ago. Been here ever since." They sat by the creek, in the shade of the cottonwoods, and Eli told her about his life. Growing up enslaved in Missouri, gaining freedom during the war, joining the cavalry, fighting Indians and outlaws across the plains. He spoke matter-of-factly about hardships that would have broken most people, about injustices that still made Nora's blood boil. Why stay in the West? She asked. Why not go east where there are cities, opportunities? Eli smiled. Because out here, what matters is what a man does, not where he came from. Cole judges people by their character, not their color. That's rare enough to be worth protecting. Plus, he gestured at the valley, it's beautiful, hard, but beautiful. I've earned my place here. That means something. That afternoon, Nora found the books Cole had mentioned. There was a surprising variety: novels by Dickens and Hawthorne, volumes of poetry, a worn Bible, books on horse breeding and agriculture. She pulled down a copy of Jane Eyre and settled into the rocking chair, letting herself get lost in someone else's story instead of her own. She was still reading when Cole returned at sunset, dusty and tired but satisfied. He washed up at the pump outside, then joined them for supper. Over the meal, he explained his plan. Tomorrow, I'm riding to Boulder Creek to talk to Sheriff Hendricks. I'll tell him about the kidnapping, about Barrett, about the auction. He'll want your testimony, Nora, when you're ready to give it. There'll be warrants issued, probably a manhunt. Barrett's got friends, but he's also got enemies, lawmen who've been wanting to bring him in for years. Your testimony could be the thing that finally puts him away. And if he comes here first? Nora asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her all day. Then he'll regret it, Cole said flatly. This is my land. Anyone riding onto it with bad intent will find themselves dealing with me, Eli, and enough firepower to start a small war. We're prepared, Nora. We won't be caught off guard. He said I belonged to him, Nora whispered. Like I was a horse or a piece of furniture. Cole leaned forward, his ice blue eyes intense. Listen to me. You don't belong to him. You don't belong to anyone. You belong to yourself, your thoughts, your choices, your future. What happened to you was evil, but it doesn't define you. You're not damaged goods. You're not diminished. You're Nora Caldwell, educated woman from Philadelphia who survived something that would have destroyed a lesser person. Don't let Jack Barrett or anyone else tell you different. The words settled over her like a warm blanket. Nora found herself blinking back tears. Not tears of sadness, but of relief, of recognition. This man, the stranger who'd ridden into a dusty square and changed everything, understood something fundamental that even she had been struggling to grasp. Her worth wasn't determined by what had been done to her, but by who she chose to be despite it. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. Cole looked uncomfortable with the gratitude, shifting in his chair. Just doing what's right. No, Nora insisted. Most people in that square were doing what was easy, what was profitable, what served their own interests. You did what was right even though it was hard and dangerous and inconvenient. There's a difference. A big one. The days began to form a pattern. Cole and Eli worked the ranch, mending fences and tending horses and managing the 100 tasks that kept a place like the AAA running. Nora helped where she could, cooking, cleaning, weeding the garden. Small things, normal things, tasks that helped her feel useful instead of helpless. A week after her rescue, Cole finally made the trip to Boulder Creek. He returned with Sheriff Hendricks, a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Nora gave her testimony in the main room of the ranch house, with Eli present as a witness. She told everything: the attack on the stagecoach, her uncle's murder, the days of captivity, the auction. Saying it out loud was harder than she'd expected, her voice breaking at points, but she forced herself through it. When she finished, Hendricks was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Miss Caldwell, I'm sorry for what happened to you. I'm sorry we live in a world where such things are possible. But I promise you this, I will do everything in my power to bring Jack Barrett and his men to justice. We've issued warrants for murder and kidnapping. There's a $1,000 reward for information leading to their capture. They won't hide for long. And in the meantime, Nora asked, in the meantime, you stay here, where you're protected. Cole's already thought this through. The AAA is defensible, isolated enough that anyone approaching can be seen from a mile away. You couldn't be in better hands. After Hendricks left, Nora found Cole in the barn, brushing down Ranger. She stood in the doorway, watching him work, the sure, gentle movements of someone who loved horses. The sheriff said I couldn't be in better hands, she said. He's right. But this can't go on forever. I can't hide here indefinitely. Cole paused in his brushing. What do you want to do? I want my life back, or some version of it. I was supposed to teach school. That was the plan. Come to Montana, help children learn, make a difference. That's still what I want. Then that's what you'll do, Cole said simply. There's a school in Boulder Creek. Teacher position's been empty since old Mrs. Henshaw passed last winter. I'll talk to the school board. If you want the job, it's yours. Just like that? Just like that. You're qualified, aren't you? Educated back east, experienced teaching? Yes, but nothing. This is Montana territory, Nora. We don't have the luxury of turning away good teachers because of what they've been through. Hell, most of us are out here because of what we've been through. Past only matters if you let it. 2 weeks later, Nora rode into Boulder Creek with Cole to meet the school board. The town was bigger than Silver Creek, more established, with a proper church and courthouse, and even a newspaper office. The school was a single-room building at the edge of town, painted white with a bell tower on top. The school board consisted of 5 people: the preacher, the mayor, a wealthy rancher, the doctor's wife, and a stern-faced woman named Harriet Blackwell, who turned out to be the judge's sister. They interviewed Nora for an hour, asking about her education, her methods, her philosophy on discipline and curriculum. When they were finished, Harriet Blackwell smiled, the first warmth she'd shown. Miss Caldwell, we'd be honored to have you as our teacher. The position includes room and board at the boarding house, $50 a month, and use of the school library. Classes start in September. Does that suit you? Nora felt something fierce and bright kindle in her chest. Hope, purpose, a future that was hers to shape. Yes, she said. Yes, that suits me perfectly. On the ride home, she couldn't stop smiling. Cole noticed and grinned back. Feels good, doesn't it? Having a plan, having a purpose. It feels like coming back to life, Nora admitted. August slipped into September, and with it came the start of the school year. Nora moved into the boarding house in Boulder Creek, a comfortable place run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, who took one look at Nora's too thin frame and immediately declared her mission to put some meat on those bones. The room was small but clean, with a view of the mountains and a writing desk where Nora could prepare lessons. Her first day teaching was terrifying and wonderful. 23 students, ranging from 6 to 15, crowded into the schoolhouse, all eager eyes and nervous energy. Nora stood at the front of the room, chalk in hand, and realized this was it. This was her moment to prove that she wasn't broken, that she could build something beautiful from the ashes of trauma. Good morning, she said, her voice steady. My name is Miss Caldwell, and I'm going to be your teacher this year. We're going to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography. But more than that, we're going to learn to think, to question, to grow. Education isn't just about memorizing facts. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. So let's get started. The days fell into a new rhythm, teaching from 8 to 3, preparing lessons in the evening, attending church socials and town meetings. Cole rode into Boulder Creek every few days, ostensibly to buy supplies or check on his accounts at the bank, but Nora knew he was really checking on her, making sure she was safe, making sure she was happy. They fell into the habit of having coffee together at the town's little cafe when he visited. Eli came too sometimes, and the 3 of them would sit and talk about everything and nothing: the weather, the news from back east, books they'd read, plans for the future. You've settled in well, Eli observed one afternoon in late September, watching Nora interact easily with the townspeople who stopped to say hello. Boulder Creek's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to be here, Nora replied. Lucky to be alive and free and doing work that matters. That's not something I take for granted. Cole said little, but his eyes were warm as he watched her. There was something there Nora had begun to realize, something more than just the protective instinct of a man honoring his dead sister's memory. Something that made her heart beat faster when he smiled, that made her look forward to his visits with an eagerness that had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with… What? She wasn't ready to name it yet, too soon, too fragile, but it was there, growing like a seed in good soil. October came, and with it, news from Sheriff Hendricks. The Barrett gang had been spotted near the Canadian border, apparently planning to flee north. A posse had been formed, and Hendricks was riding out to join the hunt. Cole volunteered immediately. I'm going, he said flatly when Nora tried to protest. Barrett killed your uncle. He tried to sell you like livestock. He needs to answer for that, and I intend to see that he does. What if something happens to you? Then Eli will look after the ranch. And you. He knows where I keep the papers, knows how to manage things. But nothing's going to happen. I'll be careful. Promise me, Nora said, gripping his arm. Promise you'll come back. Cole looked down at her hand on his arm, then up into her eyes. I promise, he said softly. I've got something to come back for. He rode out the next morning with the posse, 15 men, all armed, all determined. Nora watched them go from the schoolhouse steps, her heart in her throat, praying to a God she'd been angry at for weeks now. Please, she thought, please keep him safe. I just found him. Don't take him away. The days crawled by with no news. A week, 2 weeks. Nora threw herself into teaching, into lesson plans and student essays, anything to keep her mind occupied. But at night, lying alone in her boarding house room, she couldn't stop imagining the worst. Then on a cold afternoon in late October, the posse rode back into Boulder Creek. Nora was dismissing her students when she heard the shouts, the sudden excitement. She ran to the window and saw them, tired, dusty men on tired horses. And there, in the middle of the group, hands bound and tied to his saddle, was Jack Barrett. They'd caught him. Nora's knees went weak with relief. She counted the riders frantically, 12, 13, 14, 15, and there was Cole, whole and safe, helping to secure the prisoners at the jail. He looked up, as if sensing her gaze, and their eyes met across the distance. He nodded once, a promise kept, and Nora felt tears of relief streaming down her face. That evening, after the prisoners were secure and the initial excitement had died down, Cole came to the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson showed him to the parlor where Nora waited, and they stood there awkwardly for a moment, neither quite sure what to say. "You're all right?" Nora asked finally. "Not a scratch. Barrett put up a fight, but in the end he was outnumbered and outgunned. He's in jail now, awaiting trial. His men too. They'll hang, most likely. Murder carries a harsh penalty out here." "Good," Nora said fiercely. "They deserve it." Cole studied her face. "You've changed," he said softly, "since I first saw you on that auction block. You're stronger now, surer." "I had good teachers," Nora replied. "A cowboy who taught me about courage, an old soldier who taught me about resilience, and 23 children who taught me that the future matters more than the past." "Nora." Cole took a step closer, then stopped, as if uncertain of his welcome. "These last few weeks, riding with the posse, facing down Barrett, all I could think about was getting back here, getting back to you. And I know it's too soon. I know you've been through hell and you need time, but I need you to know. I care about you. Not as someone I saved, not as a responsibility, but as Nora. Just Nora." Nora's heart hammered in her chest. She'd known this was coming, had felt it building between them for weeks, but hearing him say it made it real in a way that both terrified and exhilarated her. "Cole Anders," she said slowly, "when you rode into Silver Creek that day, you gave me back my life, my freedom, my future. I can never repay that, but I can tell you this. What I feel for you isn't gratitude. It's not dependency. It's something else entirely, something I'm still learning to trust again. But I want to try, if you're willing to be patient." "I've got all the time in the world," Cole said, and his smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, warm and full of promise. They stood there in Mrs. Patterson's parlor, not touching, just looking at each other with new understanding, with the fragile beginning of something that might, given time and care, grow into love. Outside, November wind rattled the windows. Inside, Nora felt warm for the first time in months. Not the warmth of safety, she'd found that already, but the warmth of possibility, of a future that included not just survival, but joy. Barrett's trial came in December, held in the Boulder Creek courthouse with Judge Blackwell presiding. Nora testified again, her voice clear and steady, telling the truth without flinching. Others testified too. The sheriff, Cole, even some of Barrett's own men who'd turned on him in exchange for lighter sentences. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The sentence was death by hanging for Barrett and his top lieutenants, prison for the others. When the judge announced it, Nora felt nothing. No satisfaction, no revenge, just a kind of tired relief. Justice had been done. The nightmare was officially over. She left the courthouse and found Cole waiting outside with the horses. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready?" she agreed. They rode out to the AAA, where Eli had prepared a celebratory supper. Nothing fancy, just good food, good company, and the knowledge that the men who'd tried to destroy Nora's life would never hurt anyone again. That evening, sitting on the porch of the ranch house with a blanket around her shoulders and coffee going cold in her cup, Nora watched the stars come out one by one. Cole sat beside her, close enough to touch if she wanted to, far enough to give her space if she needed it. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about the future," Nora said. "About teaching in the spring, about watching my students grow and learn. About this place, this beautiful, harsh, impossible place that nearly killed me but also saved me. About how strange life is, how one moment can change everything." "That moment in Silver Creek," Cole said quietly. "When I rode into that square and saw you on that platform, something in me knew. Knew that you mattered, that saving you mattered." "You didn't save me," Nora corrected gently. "You gave me the chance to save myself. There's a difference." Cole considered this, then nodded. "Fair enough. So what did you learn from all of this?" Nora thought about the question, really thought about it. "I learned that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about choosing to heal. I learned that freedom is something you claim, not something that's given. I learned that the kindness of strangers can change the world. And I learned—" She turned to look at him, this man who'd ridden into her nightmare and refused to look away. "That sometimes the most important thing is just showing up, just being there when someone needs you, even if you're scared, even if it's dangerous. That matters." "It does," Cole agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, watching the valley below them fade into darkness. Somewhere a coyote called. Somewhere a creek sang its endless song. And here, on this porch, two people who'd been broken by life found themselves beginning to heal, together. "Cole?" Nora said softly. "Yeah?" "Thank you. For everything. For seeing me as a person when everyone else saw merchandise. For believing I had worth when I wasn't sure I did anymore. For being patient. For being kind. For being you." Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His was rough, calloused, warm. "Nora Caldwell," he said. "You never needed saving. You just needed someone to recognize what you already were, brave, strong, and absolutely unstoppable. I'm just grateful I got to be that someone." Nora squeezed his hand and felt something settle in her chest, something that had been unsettled since that terrible day on the Boulder Creek Road. Peace, maybe. Or the beginning of it. The knowledge that she'd survived the worst and come out the other side still herself, still whole in the ways that mattered. The future stretched before her, uncertain but promising. There would be challenges, there always were, but she'd face them with friends beside her, with purpose driving her, with the hard-won knowledge that she belonged to herself, and no one could take that away. The stars shone bright and cold above Montana territory. Below them, Nora and Cole sat together, not alone, not afraid, just two people learning to trust again, to hope again, to believe that maybe, just maybe, the best was yet to come. Winter came to Montana territory like a wolf, silent, sudden, and absolute. The first snow fell in mid-December, transforming the harsh brown landscape into something crystalline and otherworldly. Nora stood at the window of her boarding house room, watching the flakes drift past the lamplight, each one unique and temporary and beautiful. She'd been in the West for 5 months now, but it felt like a lifetime. The woman who'd stood on that auction block in Silver Creek seemed like someone from another life, a ghost she'd left behind. Teaching had become her anchor, her purpose. Each morning she walked through the cold to the schoolhouse, lit the stove, and prepared for her students. They came bundling through the door in layers of wool and fur, their cheeks red from the wind, their eyes bright with curiosity. She taught them reading and arithmetic, history and geography, but also something more: how to think, how to question, how to see beyond the boundaries of their small mountain town. Her best student was a girl named Sarah Mitchell, 10 years old with auburn braids and a mind like a steel trap. Sarah devoured every book Nora could provide, asked questions that would have stumped university professors, and dreamed of becoming a doctor someday. An ambition so audacious for a girl on the frontier that most adults dismissed it with condescending smiles. But not Nora. "Why shouldn't you be a doctor?" Nora asked one afternoon as they organized the school library together. "Because you're a girl." "That's not a reason, Sarah. That's just other people's fear disguised as tradition." Sarah looked up at her with eyes that held too much wisdom for someone so young. "My pa says women aren't smart enough for medicine. Says we're meant for cooking and babies and keeping house." "Your pa is wrong," Nora said flatly. "Not about cooking or babies or keeping house being valuable work." "They are." "But about women not being smart enough? Dead wrong. Some of the most brilliant people I've known have been women. They just never got the chance to show it because men were too scared of the competition." Sarah grinned. "You're different from other teachers we've had, Miss Caldwell. You talk to us like we're people, not just children." "That's because you are people," Nora replied. "Small people, young people, people still learning, but people all the same. You deserve respect and truth, even when the truth is complicated." It was conversations like these that reminded Nora why she'd come west, why she'd survived everything she'd survived. These children needed someone who believed in them, who saw their potential instead of their limitations. She could be that person. She was that person. Cole rode into town every week without fail, usually on Wednesday afternoons when Nora finished teaching. They'd established a routine: coffee at the cafe, sometimes a walk through town if the weather permitted, conversation that ranged from mundane to profound. He told her about ranch life, about the horses he was training, about Eli's latest attempts at baking that usually ended in disasters so spectacular they were almost impressive. She told him about her students, about the books she was reading, about her slow process of healing from trauma that some days felt complete and other days felt like it had barely begun. Their relationship existed in a strange space between friendship and courtship, neither quite one nor the other. Cole never pushed, never demanded more than Nora was willing to give, but there was something there, growing like ice crystals on a window, delicate, intricate, undeniably present. On a Wednesday in late December, Cole arrived at the schoolhouse just as Nora was dismissing her students. He stood in the doorway, snow dusting his hat and shoulders, and watched her interact with the children, answering questions, straightening a collar, pressing a book into eager hands. When the last student had bundled out into the cold, he stepped inside, removing his hat. "You're good at this," he said simply. "Teaching, you make it look natural." "It is natural," Nora replied, banking the fire in the stove. "I love it. Love watching them learn, watching their faces light up when they understand something new. It's like witnessing small miracles every day." "Speaking of miracles," Cole said, pulling a letter from his coat pocket, "this came for you. Sheriff Hendricks brought it out to the ranch this morning. It's from Philadelphia." Nora's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. The return address was her mother's handwriting, familiar and beloved. She'd written to her mother weeks ago, finally ready to explain what had happened, where she was, why she hadn't arrived in Helena as planned. But she'd been dreading the response, afraid of judgment or demands that she return home immediately. "Do you want privacy?" Cole asked gently. "No, stay, please." Nora broke the seal and unfolded the pages inside. Her mother's handwriting blurred as tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back and read aloud. "My dearest Nora, your letter arrived yesterday, and I confess I have not slept since reading it. To know what you endured, what you survived, fills me with both horror and pride. Horror at the evil that exists in this world, pride that you faced it and emerged unbroken. You ask if I'm angry that you've stayed in Montana instead of coming home. My darling girl, how could I be angry? You've found purpose, found friends, found yourself. That's all any mother wants for her child. Your father, God rest his soul, would be so proud of you, as am I. Stay in Boulder Creek. Teach those children. Build the life you deserve. And when you're ready, bring me to visit. I confess I'm curious about this cowboy who saved you and this ranch you've grown so fond of. All my love, Mother." Nora folded the letter carefully, her throat tight with emotion. "She understands," she whispered. "She actually understands." "She sounds like a wise woman," Cole said. "Raised a wise daughter." "She also wants to meet you." Cole's eyebrows rose. "Me?" "The cowboy who saved me," she said. "Though I've told her repeatedly that I saved myself and you just provided the opportunity." "Well, when she visits, we'll let her decide." Cole smiled, but there was something nervous in his eyes. "Nora, I want to ask you something. Christmas is next week. Eli and I, we usually just have a quiet day at the ranch, nothing fancy. But this year, I thought maybe, would you like to spend it with us? I know Mrs. Patterson has that big dinner planned for the boarding house residents, and if you'd rather stay in town—" "I'd love to," Nora interrupted. "I'd love to spend Christmas at the AAA." Cole's face lit up with a smile so genuine and unguarded that Nora felt her heart stutter. "Good. That's good. I'll pick you up Christmas morning, if that works." Christmas dawned clear and cold, the world wrapped in fresh snow that sparkled like diamonds under a pale blue sky. Cole arrived at the boarding house driving a sleigh pulled by Ranger, the big bay gelding sporting jingle bells on his harness that made cheerful music as they moved. Nora bundled into the seat beside Cole, wrapped in layers of wool and fur, and they glided out of Boulder Creek toward the AAA. The ranch looked like something from a storybook, smoke curling from the chimney, snow draped over the roof and fences like frosting on a cake. Eli had decorated pine boughs over the door, candles in the windows, and the smell of roasting meat wafted from inside. "Merry Christmas, Miss Nora," Eli called from the doorway, his face creased with smile lines. "Welcome home." The word struck Nora oddly. Home. Was that what the AAA was becoming? She'd thought of the boarding house as home, or perhaps her mother's house in Philadelphia. But standing here in the snow, looking at this modest ranch with these good men who'd come to mean so much to her, she realized home wasn't a place. It was wherever she felt safe and valued and free. Inside, the ranch house glowed with warmth. A small pine tree stood in the corner, decorated with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments that Eli admitted bashfully he'd made himself. Presents wrapped in simple brown paper sat beneath it. The table was set for 3, and the meal Eli had prepared was impressive: roasted venison, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread, and even a dried apple pie. They ate slowly, savoring both the food and the companionship. Cole told stories about Christmases past, before Annie died, when their family ranch in Texas had been full of life and laughter. Eli shared memories of Christmas during the war, how soldiers on both sides had sometimes called informal truces to mark the holy day. Nora described Philadelphia Christmases, elaborate affairs with extended family and formal dinners, and her father reading the Christmas story from his leather-bound Bible. After the meal, they exchanged gifts. Eli gave Nora a beautiful shawl he'd bought from a Crow woman who was renowned for her weaving, the wool soft as clouds and dyed in rich earth tones. She gave him a book of poetry by Walt Whitman that she'd ordered special from the bookstore in Helena. Cole's gift to her was more personal, a leather-bound journal, the pages blank and waiting, with her initials embossed on the cover. "For your thoughts," he said quietly. "For your stories. I figured a teacher and a woman who's lived what you've lived probably has a lot worth writing down." Nora ran her fingers over the smooth leather, touched beyond words. "It's perfect. Thank you." She retrieved her gift for him, a new pair of riding gloves made from the softest buckskin, lined with wool for the Montana winter. "I noticed your old ones were falling apart." Cole pulled them on, flexing his fingers, his eyes warm. "They fit perfect. How'd you know my size?" "I pay attention," Nora said, and felt herself blush at the implication. As evening fell, they sat by the fireplace, the room lit by flames and candles, talking in that easy way that had developed between them. Eli excused himself eventually, claiming exhaustion, though Nora suspected he was giving them privacy. Alone with Cole in the fire-lit room, she felt simultaneously comfortable and nervous, like standing at the edge of something significant. "I've been thinking," Cole said, staring into the fire, "about what happens next. With us. With Whatever this is between us. Nora's heart hammered. And what have you concluded? That I don't want to rush you, that you've been through hell and you deserve time to heal, to find yourself again, to be certain of what you want. But I also think, he turned to look at her, his ice blue eyes reflecting the firelight, that life's too short and too uncertain to waste. I learned that when Annie died. Tomorrow's never guaranteed. So if there's something worth having, something worth fighting for, you don't wait. You reach for it. And am I something worth fighting for? Nora asked softly. You're everything worth fighting for, Cole said. But I'm not the one who needs to fight. You've already done that. You've already won. Now you just need to decide what you want your victory to look like. And if that includes me, I'll be honored. If it doesn't, I'll understand and I'll still be your friend. But you need to know. I'm falling in love with you, Nora Caldwell. Have been since that day in Silver Creek, probably, and I'm done pretending otherwise. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. Nora's first instinct was to retreat, to protect herself, to avoid the risk that came with opening her heart. But she'd faced down Jack Barrett and his auction block, had testified in court, had rebuilt her life from ashes. What was love compared to that? I'm scared, she admitted, of being hurt again, of losing control, of being vulnerable. I know. But I'm also tired of being scared, tired of letting fear make my decisions. She took a deep breath. I'm falling in love with you too, Cole. It terrifies me, but it also feels right in a way nothing else has in months. So yes. Yes to whatever this is. Yes to taking the risk. Yes to you. Cole reached for her hand, and this time when their fingers intertwined, it felt different. Not comfort or support, but connection. Promise. The beginning of something neither could name yet, but both recognized as precious. They sat like that for a long time, hands joined, watching the fire burn down to embers, not talking because no words were needed. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. Inside, two wounded souls began the careful work of healing together. The new year arrived with a blizzard that shut down Boulder Creek for 3 days, snow piling so high that doors wouldn't open and livestock had to be sheltered in barns and root cellars. When the storm finally broke, the world emerged white and pristine and achingly beautiful. Nora's school reopened, children sledding down hills on their way to lessons, their laughter echoing through the cold air. Cole's visits became more frequent. Sometimes he had legitimate business in town. Sometimes he manufactured excuses. And sometimes he didn't bother with excuses at all. He'd simply appear at the schoolhouse at 3 o'clock and wait patiently while Nora finished her work. They'd walk together through the snowy streets, talking about everything and nothing, occasionally sharing a meal at the cafe or attending evening socials at the church. Boulder Creek began to notice. Small towns thrived on gossip, and the developing romance between the school teacher and the rancher provided excellent material. Mrs. Patterson started making pointed comments about spring weddings. The preacher mentioned in passing that the church would look lovely decorated with wildflowers come June. Even Sheriff Hendricks, gruff and no-nonsense, cornered Cole one day and said, "That Caldwell woman's good people. You'd be a fool to let her get away." "I know," Cole replied. "That's why I'm not planning to." In late January, Cole invited Nora to the ranch for the weekend, properly chaperoned with Eli present, everything respectable and above board. She accepted eagerly, ready for a break from town life, from the constant presence of people and noise. Mrs. Patterson packed her a bag and gave her a long look that was equal parts knowing and approving. The weekend passed in perfect simplicity. Nora helped Eli with cooking and cleaning, read by the fireplace, went for walks in the snow with Cole. They talked about their pasts more honestly than before. Cole about growing up in Texas, about his father's ranch and his mother's death from pneumonia, about Annie's laughter and her love of horses. Nora about Philadelphia society, about her father's work as a lawyer, about the genteel poverty they'd lived in after he died, trying to maintain appearances on a widow's pension. On Sunday morning, Cole took her riding. They saddled up, Nora on a gentle mare named Daisy, Cole on Ranger, and rode out into the white landscape. The cold was sharp, but not unbearable, the sun brilliant against the snow. They followed the creek upstream, through stands of cottonwood and pine, until they reached a place where the water pooled in a natural basin surrounded by rocks. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Cole said, dismounting and helping Nora down. "I come here when I need to think, when the world gets too heavy." They stood by the frozen pool, their breath making clouds in the air. Nora looked around at the pristine wilderness, at the mountains rising in the distance, at the vast sky overhead. "It's beautiful. Harsh, but beautiful. That describes Montana pretty well, doesn't it?" "And you," Cole said. "Beautiful and harsh. Strong enough to survive, soft enough to still feel. That's a rare combination, Nora." She turned to look at him, this man who'd become so essential to her life, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear, not anxiety, but certainty. "Ask me," she said quietly. "Ask you what?" "Whatever question you've been working up the courage to ask. I can see it in your eyes every time you look at me. So ask." Cole took a deep breath, removed his gloves, and reached into his coat pocket. When his hand emerged, he held a small box. Inside was a ring, simple gold, no elaborate stone, just a band that glowed warm in the winter sunlight. "Nora Caldwell," he said, and his voice shook slightly. "I know it's too soon by society's standards. I know people will say we've only known each other 6 months. But I also know that I don't want to spend another day without the promise that you'll be part of my future. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow or even this year. I'm asking if you'll build a life with me. If you'll take this ring as a promise that what we have is real and worth protecting and worth nurturing until we're both ready for the next step. Will you?" Nora looked at the ring, at Cole's face, at the wilderness around them that had nearly destroyed her but also reborn her. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was too fast, too risky, too much. But logic hadn't saved her from that auction block. Faith had. Trust had. The willingness to reach for something better even when reaching was terrifying. "Yes," she said. "Yes to the promise. Yes to the future. Yes to you." Cole's hands trembled as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he kissed her, gently, reverently, like she was something precious that might break. Nora kissed him back, tasting snowmelt and coffee and hope, and felt the last piece of herself that had been frozen since Silver Creek finally thawed. When they pulled apart, both were crying and neither cared. "I love you," Cole said. "I love your strength and your kindness and your stubborn refusal to let trauma define you. I love how you talk to those kids like they matter. I love your laugh and your intelligence and the way you look at sunsets like they're miracles. I love all of you, Nora." "I love you too," Nora whispered. "I didn't think I could. I thought maybe that part of me was broken forever. But you're teaching me that love isn't about being whole. It's about choosing to heal together. And I choose you, Cole Anders. Every day, I choose you." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, their horses walking side by side through the snow. Eli took one look at Nora's face, at the ring on her finger, and let out a whoop of joy that probably scared every animal within a mile. "About damn time," he said, pulling them both into a fierce hug. "I was starting to think you two were going to dance around each other until you were old and gray. Congratulations. You're good for each other. Anyone can see that." That evening, the three of them celebrated with Eli's attempt at a cake, which was lopsided and slightly burnt but tasted wonderful anyway, and conversation that stretched late into the night. They talked about the future, about Nora continuing to teach while living at the ranch, about maybe expanding the house to add another room or two, about children someday, if they were blessed, about building something lasting in this harsh, beautiful land. When Nora returned to Boulder Creek the next day, the ring hidden under her glove, they'd agreed to keep the engagement quiet for a while, to avoid the inevitable gossip and speculation. She felt changed. Not diminished or altered, but expanded. Like her life had been a room with the curtains drawn and someone had finally let in light. The winter months passed in a blur of teaching and weekend visits to the ranch. Nora and Cole's relationship deepened, moving beyond initial attraction into something more solid and sustaining. They learned each other's habits and quirks, his tendency to wake before dawn, her need for quiet reading time in the evenings, his scrupulous honesty, her occasional sharp tongue when provoked, the way he whistled while he worked, the way she hummed when she was concentrating. Small things, ordinary things, that somehow added up to extraordinary. In late February, news came that Jack Barrett and his lieutenants had been hanged in Helena. The execution was quick, efficient, and final. Sheriff Hendricks brought the news to Nora personally, probably expecting relief or satisfaction. Instead, she felt only emptiness. "I thought I'd feel something," she told Cole that evening as they sat on the boarding house porch, wrapped in blankets against the cold. "Vindication or closure or something. But I just feel tired. Like I've been carrying a weight for so long that now that it's gone, I don't know what to do with the space it left behind." "That's normal," Cole said. "Healing isn't a straight line. Some days you'll feel strong, some days you'll feel broken. What matters is that you keep moving forward, and you're not alone anymore. You've got me, got Eli, got your students, got this whole town that's adopted you. You're surrounded by people who care." "I know, and I'm grateful. It's just—" Nora struggled to find the words. "For months, the trial and the execution were this thing hanging over me. The future couldn't really start until the past was resolved. And now it is. Now I have to figure out what comes next." "What do you want to come next?" Nora thought about the question seriously. "I want to keep teaching, at least through this school year, maybe longer. I want to marry you when we're both ready, when it feels right instead of rushed. I want to bring my mother out to visit, show her this life I've built, and I want—" She paused, unsure if this was too much, too soon. "I want to not be afraid anymore. Not afraid of the dark or strange men or sudden noises. I want to reclaim the parts of myself that trauma stole. Can we do that? Can I do that?" "We can try," Cole said, taking her hand. "Together. One day at a time." March brought the first hints of spring, snow melting into rushing creeks, the first green shoots pushing through frozen ground, birds returning from their winter migrations. Nora's students grew restless with cabin fever, eager to be outside instead of trapped in the stuffy schoolhouse. She sympathized, feeling the same restlessness herself. On a warm afternoon in mid-March, Cole arrived at the schoolhouse with a proposition. "Take tomorrow off," he said. "Play hooky. Come out to the ranch. There's something I want to show you." "I can't just cancel school," Nora protested. "Why not? It's Friday. Tell them you're sick. Tell them you have personal business. Tell them the truth, that you need a day off to remember why you're alive. Those kids will survive one day without lessons." The mischief in his eyes was irresistible. Nora found herself agreeing, already composing the note she'd post on the schoolhouse door. "School canceled Friday due to teacher illness. Resume Monday." Friday dawned clear and unseasonably warm. The kind of day that promised winter was finally releasing its grip. Cole picked her up early and they rode out to the AAA, where Eli had packed them supplies, food, blankets, a rifle, just in case. Then Cole led her on horseback away from the ranch, up into the foothills where snow still lingered in shadows, but the south-facing slopes were bare and brown. They rode for over an hour, climbing steadily, until they crested a ridge and Nora gasped. Spread before them was a valley she'd never seen, small and secret, ringed by mountains. A lake occupied its center, still partially frozen but showing patches of brilliant blue where the ice had melted. And everywhere, were wildflowers. Thousands of them, maybe millions, carpeting the valley floor in yellow and purple and white, their color shocking against the lingering snow. "How is this possible?" Nora breathed. "It's March, it's still winter." "This valley faces south and sits low, protected from the worst winds," Cole explained. "It warms faster than anywhere else in the territory. The flowers bloom here weeks before they bloom anywhere else. It's like the mountains are keeping a secret, and this valley is it." They dismounted and walked through the flowers, their boots leaving trails through the blooms. Nora knelt to touch a delicate purple blossom, marveling at its fragility, at the fact that something so beautiful could exist in a place so harsh. It seemed impossible, miraculous, a promise that winter always ended, that life always returned. "I wanted you to see this," Cole said, standing beside her. "Wanted you to know that no matter how long or dark the winter, spring always comes. Always. It's a law of nature, more reliable than anything humans can promise, and I wanted you to see it in a place where nobody else can. This is our place now, Nora, this secret valley where flowers bloom too early, and the lake reflects the sky. This is where we can come when the world gets too heavy, when the past gets too loud. This is where we can remember that beauty exists, that life continues, that we survived. Nora stood, tears streaming down her face, and kissed him there among the wildflowers with the mountains watching and the sky impossibly blue overhead. And for the first time since Silver Creek, since that terrible day on the auction block, she felt completely, utterly, miraculously at peace. They stayed in the valley until sunset, talking and laughing and planning, making love for the first time on a blanket surrounded by flowers. The experience tender and awkward and perfect. As darkness fell, they rode back to the ranch, their bodies tired but their spirits soaring. "Thank you," Nora said as they approached the ranch, lamplight glowing in the windows where Eli waited. "For today. For everything. For showing me that life after trauma can be more than just survival. It can be joy." "You're welcome," Cole replied. "But Nora, you have to know. The joy was always there. I just helped you find it again. You did the hard work. You did the healing. I'm just lucky enough to be here to witness it." Spring came in earnest after that, the world exploding into life and color. Nora finished the school year with a sense of accomplishment, watching her students advance, knowing she'd made a difference in their lives. Sarah Mitchell, her star pupil, received a scholarship to a boarding school in Denver where she could pursue higher education, a victory that felt as much Nora's as Sarah's. As summer approached, Nora and Cole began making concrete plans for their future. They decided on a fall wedding, giving them time to prepare, but not so much time that waiting became torture. Nora wrote to her mother, inviting her to Montana for the ceremony. The responding letter was enthusiastic. Her mother would arrive in September and stay through October, giving her a chance to meet Cole properly and see the life her daughter had built. But before any of that could happen, before the carefully laid plans could unfold, trouble returned to the AAA ranch. And it came with smoke and fire and a familiar name that made Nora's blood run cold. It started on a Tuesday in late June when Cole rode into Boulder Creek with news that cut through Nora like a knife. "Smoke on the horizon," he said grimly, coming from the direction of the ranch. "We need to go. Now." They rode hard, Nora clinging to Cole as Ranger ate up the miles between town and the AAA. As they crested the final ridge, Nora's worst fears were confirmed. Black smoke billowed from the ranch, flames visible even from a distance. And circling the property on horseback were figures, men with guns deliberately set on destruction. "Barrett's men," Cole growled, recognizing them even from a distance. "The ones who got prison sentences instead of hanging. They must have escaped, must be here for revenge." He pulled Ranger to a halt, his mind clearly racing through options. "I need to go down there. Need to stop them before they burn everything. But I can't take you into danger, Nora. I need you to ride to Boulder Creek, get the sheriff, bring help." "No." Nora's voice was steel. "No, I'm not leaving you. I'm not running away while you risk your life. Not again. Not ever again." Cole turned to look at her, and something in his expression shifted. He saw her not as someone who needed protection, but as someone who'd already proven she could fight her own battles. "All right," he said, "but stay close and stay smart. These men are desperate and dangerous. Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." They rode down into the valley together. The barn was fully engulfed by the time they reached the ranch, flames leaping 30 feet into the air, sparks swirling like angry fireflies against the afternoon sky. The heat hit them even from 100 yards away, a wall of scorching air that made breathing difficult and eyes water. Nora could hear the horses screaming inside the corral, terrified by the fire and smoke, and the sound cut through her like a blade. Cole pulled Ranger to a halt behind the cover of a small rise, assessing the situation with the cold calculation of a man who'd faced danger before. Nora counted 5 men on horseback circling the property, all armed, all wearing the cocky confidence of people who thought they'd already won. She recognized one of them, a weasel-faced man named Pete Garris, who'd been part of Barrett's gang, who'd stood in that Silver Creek square watching her humiliation with a smile on his thin lips. "Where's Eli?" Nora asked, her voice tight with fear for the old soldier who'd become like family. "I don't know. Maybe in the house, maybe hiding in the cottonwoods by the creek. Eli's smart, and he's fought in worse situations than this. He'll be all right." Cole's jaw was set hard as granite, his hand resting on his revolver. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to circle around to the east, come at them from the side where they won't expect it. You're going to work your way to the house through those trees, see if you can find Eli, get him armed if he's not already. Don't engage these men unless you absolutely have to. Your job is survival, not heroics. Understand? Cole? Understand? His voice was harder now, edged with fear for her safety. Yes, I understand. Nora touched his face briefly, a gesture that held everything they couldn't say in that moment. Be careful. I can't lose you. You won't. He kissed her quickly, fiercely, then was gone, riding low in the saddle as he circled wide to avoid detection. Nora dismounted and tied Ranger's reins to a sturdy pine, then made her way toward the house on foot, using the terrain and vegetation for cover. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat, taste copper fear on her tongue. This was different from the passive terror of the auction block, where she'd been helpless and bound. Now she had choices, agency, the ability to affect the outcome. That should have made her feel better, but instead it made everything more frightening because now failure would be her own fault. She moved tree to tree, rock to rock, staying low and quiet like Eli had taught her during lazy afternoons at the ranch when he'd shared stories of his cavalry days. Always use the terrain, he'd said. God gave us rocks and trees and shadows for a reason. A smart fighter uses every advantage. Those lessons, given casually while they'd cleaned tack or weeded the garden, might save her life now. The house still stood, though the porch showed scorch marks where someone had tried to set it alight and failed. The wood was too green, too fresh, or maybe the wind had been wrong. The windows were dark, and Nora couldn't tell if anyone was inside. She reached the back door without being spotted and tried the handle. Locked. She knocked softly, a pattern Eli had taught her. 2 quick, 1 slow, 2 quick. A code that meant friend. The door cracked open immediately and Eli's face appeared, blood running from a cut above his eye, but his expression fierce and focused. He pulled her inside quickly, shutting and bolting the door behind her. Thank God, he breathed. Where's Cole? Circling around to the east. What happened? Who are these men? Garrus and 4 others from Barrett's gang. They escaped from the territorial prison 3 weeks ago. Been laying low, apparently, planning this. I was in the barn when they rode up. Barely got the horses out before they torched it. Shot at me when I ran for the house. He touched the cut on his head. Bullet grazed me, but I made it inside. They've been circling like buzzards for the last hour, taking shots at the windows, shouting about making us pay for what happened to Barrett. They're here for revenge, Nora said, and felt cold settle into her bones despite the heat from the burning barn. They're here for you, Eli corrected grimly. Garrus was shouting about the woman who testified, who got Barrett hanged. They think you're here. Think if they can take you, they can finish what Barrett started. The word should have terrified her, should have sent her spiraling back into helplessness. Instead, Nora felt something else. Rage. Clean, clarifying rage that burned away fear and left only determination. These men had taken enough from her, her uncle, her innocence, her sense of safety. They'd stolen months of her life to trauma and nightmares. They'd tried to reduce her to property, to merchandise, to something less than human. Not again. Never again. Where are your weapons? She asked. Eli gestured to the table where 2 rifles lay, along with Cole's spare revolver and boxes of ammunition. I've been conserving shots, waiting for a clear target, but they're staying mobile, making themselves hard to hit. Smart tactics, unfortunately. Nora picked up the revolver, checked the cylinder like Cole had taught her during Sunday afternoon shooting lessons at the ranch. 6 bullets. 6 chances. Her hand was steady, steadier than she'd expected, and that steadiness felt like a victory in itself. Can you shoot? Eli asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Cole taught me. I'm not great, but I can hit what I aim at if it's close enough. She moved to a window, peering carefully around the frame. The barn was collapsing now, the roof caving in with a roar and a shower of sparks. The horses were in the corral still, but at least they were alive, huddled together at the far end away from the flames. Where's Cole now? Can't see him, which means he's where he needs to be. Eli took position at another window, rifle ready. Those men out there think they're in control, think they're the hunters, and we're the prey. Cole's about to teach them different. The first shot came from the east, exactly where Cole had said he'd be, and one of the riders jerked and fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered immediately, wheeling their mounts and returning fire, but they were shooting at shadows, at echoes. Cole had already moved. "Now," Eli said, and fired through the window, his bullet catching another rider in the leg. The man howled and nearly fell, only staying mounted through desperate grip and luck. The dynamic shifted in an instant. The riders who'd been circling lazily, confidently, now clustered together for mutual protection, their horses dancing nervously. Garrus was shouting orders, trying to maintain control, but Nora could hear the edge of panic in his voice. They'd expected an old man alone, maybe an easy target. Instead, they were caught in a crossfire, pinned down, suddenly prey instead of predators. "There, third window!" Garrus screamed, spotting Eli's position. 3 guns turned toward the house and opened fire. Glass shattered, wood splintered, bullets punched through the walls with sounds like angry hornets. Nora threw herself flat, her heart racing, the revolver clutched in both hands. Eli dropped below the window, breathing hard. "You all right?" "Yes, you." "Been shot at by experts. These boys are amateurs." But his face was grim. "Problem is, they've got us pinned. Can't shoot back without exposing ourselves. And sooner or later they'll realize they can just burn us out like they did the barn." As if summoning it with words, Nora smelled smoke, different from the barn smoke, closer, more immediate. She crawled to the front door and saw flames licking at the porch boards where someone had thrown a torch. The wood was catching now, really catching, and within minutes the whole front of the house would be ablaze. "Fire," she said, and the word came out strangled. Eli swore with the fluency of an old soldier and grabbed a bucket of water they kept by the door. But even as he threw it on the flames, Nora could see it wasn't enough. The fire was spreading too fast, feeding on the dry wood, and they only had 2 buckets of water in the house. Not nearly enough. "We have to get out," Eli said. "Back door into the trees, make for the creek. Once we're there, we've got cover and water if we need it." "What about Cole?" "Cole can take care of himself. Our job is to survive, so he doesn't have to worry about us while he's fighting." Eli grabbed the rifles and extra ammunition. "On 3. Stay low, stay fast, don't stop for anything. 1, 2. The back door exploded inward before he could say 3, kicked open with brutal force, and Pete Garrus filled the doorway with a revolver in each hand and madness in his eyes. "Well, well," he said, grinning through the smoke that was beginning to fill the house. "Look what we got here. The schoolteacher herself. Barrett said you were a pretty thing, and he wasn't wrong. Shame about what's going to happen to you, but you brought this on yourself, testifying like you did." Eli swung his rifle up, but Garrus was faster, firing once. The bullet caught Eli in the chest, and he went down hard, the rifle clattering from his hands. Nora screamed and raised the revolver, but Garrus kicked it from her grip before she could fire, the weapon skittering across the floor. Garrus said, wagging a finger like she was a naughty child. "None of that now. You and me, we're going to go outside and have a conversation with my boys. Then we're going to finish what Mr. Barrett started in Silver Creek. Been thinking about it for months, sitting in that cell, imagining all the things we're going to do to you." Nora's mind raced, calculating odds and options. Garrus had 2 guns and she had none. Eli was down and maybe dead. Oh God, please don't let him be dead. Cole was somewhere outside fighting 3 other men and didn't know she was in immediate danger. The house was on fire and filling with smoke. Every logical calculation said she was finished, that this was how the story ended. But Nora Caldwell hadn't survived an auction block and months of trauma just to give up now. She'd learned something essential in those terrible months. She was stronger than she knew, braver than she felt, and absolutely willing to fight with every weapon she had, even if all she had were words and will. "You're going to hang," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Just like Barrett did. You kill me. You kill Eli. You'll have every lawman in Montana hunting you. There's no escape, Garrus. This is suicide." "Maybe," Garrus agreed cheerfully, "but at least we'll go out having finished the job. Now move, outside. And if you scream or run, I'll put a bullet in your spine and drag you. Your choice." He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise, and shoved her toward the broken door. Nora stumbled over Eli's legs and felt his hand grab her ankle briefly. A message. He was alive. Badly hurt, but alive. That knowledge gave her courage. Outside, the smoke was worse, the barn now just a skeleton of charred beams, the house beginning to catch in earnest. Two of Garrus's men were down, one dead from Cole's rifle, one wounded and out of the fight. The other two had dismounted and taken cover behind the water trough, watching their leader emerge with his prize. "Got her," Garrus crowed. "The bitch who got Barrett killed. Now we—" His words cut off as a bullet took his hat clean off his head, the shot so precise it could only be deliberate. Cole's voice rang out from somewhere in the cottonwoods, cold and implacable. "Let her go, Garrus. Let her go and ride out of here, and maybe you live to see tomorrow. Or keep holding her and find out if I can take your head off as clean as I took your hat." Garrus's hand tightened on Nora's arm, using her as a shield as he backed toward his horse. "You think I'm scared of you, Anders? You're one man. I got 2 guns and this woman between us. You shoot, you hit her." "Maybe," Cole said. And now Nora could see him, emerging from the tree line with his rifle leveled, his face like something carved from stone. "Or maybe I'm good enough to thread that needle. You willing to bet your life on it?" "I'm betting hers," Garrus snarled. But Nora could feel the tremor in his hand, smell the fear sweat on him. He was cracking, the bravado starting to fracture. The 2 men behind the water trough shifted nervously, clearly having second thoughts about this entire enterprise. One called out, "Pete, maybe we should just go. This ain't worth it." "Shut up!" Garrus screamed. "We came here to do a job, and we're going to finish it." Nora made her decision in that instant. She'd been a victim once, helpless and bound on an auction block, her fate in other people's hands. Never again. Not ever again. If she was going to survive this, it would be because she saved herself. She went limp suddenly, dead weight in Garrus's grip, and when he reflexively tried to hold her up, she drove her elbow backward into his ribs with every ounce of strength she possessed. The blow landed hard, and Garrus grunted, his grip loosening just enough. Nora tore free and threw herself sideways, hitting the ground and rolling. Cole's rifle cracked once and Garrus screamed, the revolver flying from his right hand as the bullet shattered his wrist. He grabbed for his left gun, but Cole was already working the lever, firing again, and this bullet took Garrus in the thigh. He went down hard, writhing in the dirt, no longer a threat. The 2 men behind the water trough threw down their weapons immediately, hands in the air. "We're done. We surrender. Don't shoot." Cole kept the rifle trained on them as he moved to Nora, his eyes scanning her frantically. "Are you hurt? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine. But Eli, he's in the house. He's been shot." Cole was moving before she finished speaking, running for the burning house with Nora close behind. They found Eli where he'd fallen, conscious but pale, blood soaking his shirt. Together they dragged him outside into clean air, away from the smoke and flames. "How bad?" Cole asked, tearing open Eli's shirt to assess the wound. "Bad enough," Eli managed, his voice thready with pain. "Bullet's still in there. Left side. Maybe hit a rib. But I've survived worse. Just get me to the dock in Boulder Creek and I'll be fine." Nora pressed her petticoat against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding while Cole worked. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard, but she forced them steady. Eli had been there for her from the beginning, had welcomed her to the ranch, had taught her and protected her. She would not let him die in the dirt because she couldn't control her own fear. "You're going to be fine," she told him firmly. "Do you hear me, Eli Freeman? You're going to be fine because I'm not losing you. Cole and I are getting married in the fall, and you're going to be best man, and you're going to make another terrible cake, and we're going to laugh about it. So you hold on, you stubborn old soldier. That's an order." Eli smiled weakly. "Yes, ma'am. Wouldn't dream of disobeying." Cole looked up at the sound of hoofbeats and relaxed slightly as Sheriff Hendricks appeared over the rise with 6 deputies, drawn by the smoke visible for miles. The lawmen took in the scene, the burning barn, the wounded and surrendered outlaws, Eli bleeding in Nora's arms, and went immediately to work securing prisoners and rendering aid. Hendricks knelt beside Eli, his weathered face grim. "Heard you got shot playing hero again, Eli. When you gonna learn?" "When it stops working, I suppose." Eli's eyes were starting to drift closed. "Doc Pritchard's in town. He can patch you up good as new. We'll get you there. You—" Hendricks turned to Cole. "You two all right?" "We are now," Cole said, "but Garrus and his men escaped from the territorial prison. Came here for revenge, Tried to burn us out. Tried to take Nora. Tried and failed, Hendricks observed. Seems to be a pattern with you folks. Trouble keeps finding you, and you keep surviving it. He looked at the burning house, at the destroyed barn. This is going to cost you, Cole. Rebuilding won't be cheap. I don't care about the buildings, Cole said flatly. Buildings can be replaced. Nora and Eli can't. They loaded Eli into a wagon commandeered from one of the outbuildings that hadn't burned, Nora climbing in beside him to keep pressure on his wound during the ride to town. Cole rode alongside on Ranger, his rifle across his saddle, still alert for threats, even though the immediate danger had passed. The ride to Boulder Creek took 40 minutes that felt like hours. Nora talked to Eli the whole way, telling him stories about her students, about the letter she'd gotten from her mother, about the Wildflower Valley Cole had shown her, anything to keep him conscious and focused. Eli's responses grew weaker as they traveled, but he never stopped answering, never stopped fighting. Doc Pritchard was waiting at his office when they arrived, alerted by a deputy who'd ridden ahead. He was an older man with steady hands and kind eyes who'd seen his share of gunshot wounds over 40 years of frontier medicine. He took one look at Eli and started issuing orders like a general commanding troops. Get him on the table. Boil water. I need clean bandages, whiskey for antiseptic, and my surgical kit. Move. Cole and two deputies lifted Eli onto the examination table while Doc Pritchard cut away his bloody shirt. The wound was ugly, a dark hole in his left side still seeping blood, but Pritchard nodded thoughtfully as he examined it. Bullet's in there, but it missed the lung, probably bounced off a rib. That's lucky. He's lost blood and he'll need time to heal, but barring infection or complications, I think he'll make it. But I need to operate now. Get that bullet out before it causes more damage. It's going to hurt like hell even with whiskey, and I'll need strong men to hold him down. Can you do that, Cole? Whatever you need, Cole said without hesitation. And the lady, Pritchard glanced at Nora, might want to wait outside. This isn't going to be pretty. I'm staying, Nora said firmly. Eli stayed when I needed him. I'm returning the favor. What followed was one of the longest hours of Nora's life. Doc Pritchard worked with practiced efficiency, but even so, extracting a bullet from deep muscle and bone was brutal, bloody work. Eli endured it with the stoicism of a man who'd been wounded before, biting down on a leather strap, his body rigid with pain despite the whiskey they'd poured down his throat. Nora held his hand and didn't look away, bearing witness to his suffering because someone should, because he deserved that respect. When the bullet finally came out, a misshapen piece of lead that Pritchard dropped into a basin with a clink, Eli sagged against the table, conscious but exhausted. Pritchard stitched the wound closed with neat, precise sutures, then bandaged it heavily. There, he said, wiping blood from his hands. That's the best I can do. Now, it's up to him and God. He needs rest, fluids, and someone to watch him for signs of infection. No movement, no strain, nothing that could tear those stitches. A week in bed minimum, probably 2 before he can walk around much. Understand? He can stay at the boarding house, Nora said immediately. Mrs. Patterson has an empty room on the ground floor. I'll watch him, make sure he follows orders. You're a good woman, Miss Caldwell, Pritchard said. Eli's lucky to have friends like you and Cole. They moved Eli to the boarding house once he was stable enough to transport. Mrs. Patterson took one look at the situation and immediately went into mothering mode, fussing over blankets and pillows and hot broth while Eli protested weakly that he wasn't an invalid. But Nora could see the gratitude in his eyes, the relief at being cared for after years of caring for himself and others. That evening, after Eli had finally fallen into exhausted sleep and Mrs. Patterson had retired to her own room, Nora and Cole sat on the boarding house porch watching the sun set. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red, beautiful and indifferent to the violence that had marked the day. The house is gone, Cole said quietly. Barn's completely destroyed. We'll have to rebuild everything from scratch. That's months of work, thousands of dollars. But you're alive, Nora said. Eli's alive. I'm alive. That's what matters. I know, Cole ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time all day, Nora saw how shaken he was. When I saw Garrus holding you, when I realized what he meant to do, I've never been that scared in my life, not even when Annie died, because losing you would be worse somehow. Annie was taken from me, but you I chose. You chose me back. Losing that would break something in me that couldn't be fixed. Nora took his hand, lacing their fingers together. You didn't lose me. I'm right here. And I'm not going anywhere. Today proved something important, Cole. It proved that I'm not a victim anymore. When Garrus grabbed me, I fought back. I saved myself. Not because you weren't there to save me, but because I could. Because I'm stronger than the trauma they inflicted. That's a gift you gave me. Not by rescuing me, but by believing I could rescue myself. Cole pulled her close, and Nora rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, smelling the smoke and sweat and horse that clung to him. They sat like that as darkness fell and stars emerged, two people who'd been tested by fire and survived. The next morning brought more challenges. The sheriff needed statements from all of them about the attack. Garrus and his surviving men were locked up, awaiting trial, but the legal process required documentation and testimony. Nora spent hours at the courthouse, reliving the previous day's terror for the official record, her voice steady even as her hands shook. When the formalities were finally complete, Sheriff Hendricks walked her outside into the summer sunshine. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his tone more gentle than usual, "I want you to know something. What you did yesterday, fighting back, helping save Eli, keeping your head when most people would have fallen apart, that took real courage. The kind we don't see often, even out here where courage is common currency. You're not just a survivor anymore. You're a fighter, and this territory needs people like you." "Thank you," Nora said, surprised by how much the words meant coming from this gruff lawman. "But I was just doing what needed to be done." "That's what all the real heroes say," Hendricks replied with a rare smile. "The loudmouths and braggarts, they tell stories about their courage. The genuinely brave, they just do the work and move on. You're the real thing, Miss Caldwell. Don't forget that." Cole and Nora spent the next week shuttling between Boulder Creek, where Eli was recovering, and the AAA, where they assessed the damage and began planning reconstruction. The barn was a total loss, burned to the foundation. The house was partially salvageable. The back half had survived relatively intact, but the front needed to be completely rebuilt. The corral fencing was damaged. Equipment had been destroyed. The financial toll was staggering, but the community rallied in ways that moved Nora to tears. Ranchers from neighboring spreads showed up with lumber and tools and willing hands. The men from Boulder Creek organized work parties, arriving on weekends to help with construction. Even her students appeared one Saturday, the older ones ready to work, the younger ones bringing food their mothers had prepared. It was frontier hospitality at its finest, the understanding that when trouble struck, you helped your neighbors because someday you'd need help too. Sarah Mitchell, Nora's star pupil, approached her during one of these workdays with her mother in tow. Mrs. Mitchell was a stern-faced woman who'd always been cordial but distant to Nora, clearly unsure what to make of a schoolteacher who'd survived an attempted sale at auction. "Miss Caldwell," Mrs. Mitchell said formally, "I want to apologize. When you first came to Boulder Creek, I had reservations about your past, about whether someone who'd been through such things should be teaching impressionable children. I see now how wrong I was. The courage you've shown, the grace with which you've rebuilt your life, the way you've inspired my daughter to dream bigger than this little town. You're exactly the kind of woman our children should look up to. I'm sorry I ever doubted you." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. That means more than you know." "Sarah tells me you're getting married in the fall," Mrs. Mitchell continued, "to Mr. Anders. That's a good man you're getting, Miss Caldwell, and he's getting a remarkable woman. I hope you'll both be very happy." As Mrs. Mitchell walked away, Sarah lingered, her face serious. "Miss Caldwell, when those men came after you, you fought back. You saved yourself. That's what I want to be when I grow up, someone who fights back, who doesn't just accept what the world says she should be." "Thank you for showing me that's possible." "Oh, Sarah," Nora said, pulling the girl into a hug. "You're already that person. You always have been. I just helped you see it." Eli recovered slowly but steadily under Mrs. Patterson's attentive care and Nora's supervision. After 2 weeks, he was walking around, though Doc Pritchard warned him against any strenuous activity for at least another month. Eli chafed at the restriction but obeyed, spending his recovery time reading the books Nora brought him and entertaining Mrs. Patterson's other boarders with stories of his cavalry days. On a warm evening in mid-July, when Eli was finally strong enough to leave the boarding house for short walks, the three of them, Nora, Cole, and Eli, sat by Boulder Creek's namesake waterway, watching the current flow past. "The house should be finished by September," Cole said. "Barn will take longer, maybe into October, but we'll be ready for winter, which is what matters." "And ready for a wedding," Eli added with a grin, "assuming you two haven't changed your minds about that." "Not a chance," Nora said firmly. "October 15th, as planned. My mother arrives the last week of September. Everything's arranged." "About that," Cole said, suddenly nervous. "Meeting your mother. I'm a rancher, Nora. A cowboy. I don't have fancy manners or Eastern education. What if she doesn't think I'm good enough for you?" Nora laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Cole Anders, you rode into an auction square and defied armed men to save a stranger. You've protected me, supported me, helped me heal from trauma that would have broken most people. You're brave and kind and honest, and you treat me like an equal partner instead of property. If my mother doesn't think you're good enough, then she's not the woman who raised me. But she is, so trust me, she'll love you." "I hope so," Cole muttered, but he was smiling. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the water gold and listening to the evening sounds of the town settling in for night. Nora thought about how far she'd come from that terrible day in Silver Creek, how much had changed and how much she'd changed. She wasn't the same woman who'd stood on that auction block, helpless and terrified. That woman had been broken and discarded. The woman she was now had been forged in fire, tested, refined, strengthened. She'd learned that survival wasn't just about enduring trauma, it was about transforming it, using it as fuel for growth instead of letting it become a prison. She'd learned that love didn't make you weak, it made you brave. And she'd learned that freedom wasn't something given, it was something claimed and defended and cherished every single day. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, watching her face. "I'm thinking about the future," Nora said. "About our wedding, about building a life together, about the children we might have someday, about teaching and ranching and growing old with you in this beautiful, terrible, impossible place. I'm thinking that I'm happy, Cole. Genuinely, deeply happy. And that's something I wasn't sure I'd ever feel again." Cole leaned over and kissed her, gentle and sweet, while Eli diplomatically studied the creek like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. "I'm happy too," Cole said when they parted. "Happier than I ever thought I deserved to be. And it's because of you, Nora. Because you took the worst thing that ever happened to you and refused to let it define you. You're the strongest person I've ever known." "We're all strong," Nora corrected, glancing at Eli. "We've all survived things that should have destroyed us. That's what makes us family, not blood, not legal contracts, but shared survival and mutual respect and the choice to stand together no matter what comes." "Amen to that," Eli said softly. "Amen to that." The stars came out one by one as they sat together by the water, three people who'd found each other in the aftermath of tragedy and built something worth protecting. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always challenges on the frontier, but tonight they had peace. Tonight they had each other. And that was enough. August melted into September, and with the changing season came a transformation of the AAA ranch that felt almost miraculous. The new barn rose from the ashes of the old, larger and sturdier, built with the collective effort of neighbors who understood that today's help might be tomorrow's salvation. The house took shape gradually, the front portion rebuilt with careful attention to making it not just functional but beautiful, with a proper parlor and an additional bedroom for guests. Cole insisted on quality over speed, and Nora loved him more for it. This wasn't just reconstruction, it was a statement that they were building something meant to last. The work was hard and the days were long, but there was joy in it too. Nora found herself at the ranch more often than in town, helping where she could, cooking meals for the work crews, organizing supplies, becoming in practice, if not yet in law, the lady of the house. The men treated her with a respect that had been earned rather than assumed, asking her opinion on decisions, listening when she spoke, acknowledging that she had as much stake in the ranch's future as Cole did. On a crisp morning in late September, Nora stood on the freshly completed porch and watched the sun rise over the mountains, painting the valley in shades of rose and gold. Behind her, she could hear Cole and Eli discussing the day's work schedule, their voices comfortable and familiar. In 3 days, her mother would arrive on the stagecoach from Helena. In 3 weeks, she would marry Cole in the little church in Boulder Creek. The future she'd once thought impossible stretched before her, solid and real and hers. "You're up early," Cole said, joining her on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Nervous about your mother coming?" "A little," Nora admitted. "It's been almost a year since I've seen her. I've changed so much. I hope she still recognizes me." "She'll recognize you," Cole said confidently. "Maybe you've changed on the outside. You're stronger, more confident, more yourself than you probably were in Philadelphia. But the core of who you are, that's the same. That's what she'll see." Nora sipped her coffee and considered his words. He was right, of course. The essential Nora, the woman who valued education and kindness and justice, hadn't changed. She'd just learned to fight for those values instead of assuming they'd be protected by others. "What about you?" she asked. "Are you nervous about meeting her?" Cole was quiet for a moment, then admitted, "Terrified. What if she thinks I'm too rough, too uneducated, too Western? What if she tries to convince you to come back to Philadelphia with her?" "Then I'll tell her no," Nora said simply. "My life is here now, Cole. With you, with Eli, with my students. I love my mother and I'm grateful for everything she's given me, but I'm a grown woman making my own choices. And I choose this. I choose you. Every single time, I choose you." Cole set down his coffee cup and pulled her into his arms, and they stood like that in the dawn light, holding each other, drawing strength from their shared certainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would always be challenges, they would face them together. The next 3 days passed in a flurry of preparation. The ranch house had to be made presentable for a guest from Philadelphia society, which meant Nora scrubbing floors and washing windows while Cole and Eli made repairs to the guest room furniture and argued about whether curtains were really necessary. Mrs. Patterson contributed fresh linens and advised Nora on proper entertaining, though Nora suspected her mother would be more interested in the substance of her daughter's life than the style of her accommodations. Boulder Creek itself buzzed with anticipation. News had spread that the schoolteacher's mother was coming from back east, and the town had collectively decided this reflected on all of them. The cafe repainted its sign. The general store stocked tea and imported biscuits. Even the saloon made an effort to look more respectable, though Nora doubted her mother would set foot in such an establishment. On the afternoon her mother was due to arrive, Nora waited at the stage station with Cole beside her and Eli standing slightly behind, all of them dressed in their best clothes and trying not to look as nervous as they felt. The stage was late. It was always late, and with each passing minute, Nora's anxiety increased. What if her mother had changed her mind? What if something had happened on the journey? What if— "There," Cole said, pointing down the road where dust rose in the distance. "That'll be it." The stagecoach rattled into view, pulled by 6 tired horses and covered in trail dust. It pulled to a halt with a creak of leather and wood, and the driver climbed down to open the passenger door. A woman emerged, elegant despite the rigors of travel, her gray-streaked dark hair pinned up beneath a sensible hat, her traveling dress the color of deep burgundy. She was in her early 50s, fine-boned and graceful, and when her eyes found Nora's face, they filled with tears. "Nora," Catherine Caldwell said, and her voice broke on the name. "Mother." Nora ran to her, propriety forgotten, and they embraced in the dusty street while the stage driver unloaded luggage and Cole and Eli waited at a respectful distance. Catherine held her daughter at arm's length, studying her face with the intensity only a mother could manage. "Let me look at you. Oh, my darling girl, you look so different, so strong, so alive." "I am alive," Nora said, laughing and crying simultaneously. "I'm more alive than I've ever been. Mother, there's so much to tell you, so much I want to show you, but first—" She turned and beckoned Cole forward. "There's someone you need to meet." Cole approached with his hat in his hands, his expression somewhere between hopeful and terrified. Catherine studied him with sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. The honest face, the work-roughened hands, the way he looked at Nora like she hung the moon and stars. "Mrs. Caldwell," Cole said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "It's an honor to meet you. Your daughter has told me so much about you. Thank you for making the journey. I know it wasn't easy." Catherine continued her assessment for a long moment, and Nora held her breath. Then her mother smiled, warm and genuine, and extended her hand. "Mr. Anders, thank you for saving my daughter's life, for giving her a chance to build something beautiful from something terrible. I'm in your debt." "No debt, ma'am," Cole said, taking her hand gently. "Nora saved herself. I just provided an opportunity, and she's given me far more than I ever gave her. Purpose, love, a future worth fighting for. If anyone's in debt, it's me." "Charming and humble," Catherine observed. "My late husband would have approved. He always said the best men were the ones who didn't feel the need to prove it constantly." She turned to Eli, who'd hung back, uncertain of his welcome. "And you must be Eli Freeman, the Buffalo soldier who helped protect my daughter. Nora wrote about you at length, about your kindness and your courage." Eli looked startled at being addressed directly, then touched his hat respectfully. "Ma'am, just did what any decent person would do. Your daughter's good people. We're lucky to have her out here." "I think the luck runs both ways," Catherine said warmly. "Now, someone mentioned accommodations. I've been traveling for 3 days, and I'd very much like to wash the dust off and have a decent cup of tea." They took Catherine to the boarding house first, where Mrs. Patterson had prepared the best room and immediately adopted Nora's mother as a co-conspirator in all matters domestic. After Catherine had rested and refreshed herself, Nora took her on a tour of Boulder Creek, showing her the school where she taught, the church where she and Cole would marry, the cafe where they'd spent so many afternoons talking. Catherine took it all in with intelligent eyes, asking perceptive questions, clearly trying to understand the life her daughter had chosen. That evening, they had dinner at the ranch, just family, as Eli called it. Catherine marveled at the rebuilt house, at the vast Montana sky, at the mountains that seemed to go on forever. Over roasted chicken and vegetables from the garden, she asked the questions Nora had been expecting. "Tell me the truth," Catherine said, looking between Nora and Cole. "Are you truly happy here? This isn't just you making the best of a terrible situation? You're not staying out of obligation or fear or because you think you have no other options?" Nora reached for Cole's hand under the table, drew strength from his solid presence, and answered with absolute honesty. "Mother, I won't pretend that what happened to me wasn't terrible. It was. It nearly broke me, but surviving it taught me something important. I'm stronger than I knew, braver than I thought, capable of more than I'd imagined. And yes, I'm happy here. Genuinely, deeply happy. I love teaching these children. I love this land despite its harshness. And I love Cole. Not because he saved me, but because of who he is. Honest, kind, respectful, willing to see me as an equal partner. I'm choosing this life, Mother, actively choosing it, and I hope you can support that choice." Catherine was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I can. I do. When I received your first letter explaining what had happened, I wanted to come immediately and bring you home. But your father taught me something before he died. Sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is trust their child's judgment. You're not running away from trauma, Nora. You're running towards something better. That takes real courage. I'm proud of you." The relief Nora felt was almost physical, like a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Thank you. That means everything to me. Though I do have one question," Catherine said, turning to Cole with a hint of maternal sternness. "Your intentions toward my daughter. I assume they're honorable?" "Yes, ma'am," Cole said without hesitation. "I intend to marry her, protect her, support her dreams, respect her independence, and love her for the rest of my life. In that order, and all at once." Catherine smiled. "Good answer, Mr. Anders. Very good answer indeed." The next 2 weeks passed in a pleasant blur. Catherine settled into life at the boarding house and quickly became a fixture in Boulder Creek society. She had tea with Mrs. Patterson and the other town ladies, attended a church social where she charmed the preacher and scandalized the congregation by expressing support for women's suffrage, and even visited Nora's school where she observed a full day of lessons and afterward praised Nora's teaching methods with the authority of someone who recognized excellence when she saw it. She also spent considerable time at the AAA, developing an easy rapport with Eli that made Nora's heart swell. Her mother had always judged people by their character rather than their circumstances, and she clearly recognized in Eli a kindred spirit, someone who'd survived hardship with grace and emerged stronger for it. "You've built something remarkable here," Catherine told Cole one afternoon as they sat on the porch watching Nora and Eli work in the garden. "Not just the physical ranch, though that's impressive enough, but a community, a family, a place where people are valued for who they are rather than what society says they should be. That's rare, Mr. Anders, especially out here on the frontier where life is so harsh." "The frontier is harsh," Cole agreed, "but it's also honest. You can't hide who you really are when survival depends on everyone pulling their weight. Character shows through eventually, good or bad. I've learned to surround myself with people whose character I trust, like Eli, like Nora, like, I hope, you." Catherine laughed. "Trying to recruit me to Montana Territory, Mr. Anders? Would that be such a bad thing? There's plenty of room out here for people with vision and courage, and Nora would love having you closer." "Perhaps someday," Catherine said thoughtfully. "After you two are settled, after I've seen how this adventure turns out. But I'll confess, there's something appealing about this place, something honest and real that Philadelphia society lacks. I can see why Nora chose to stay." The week before the wedding brought a flurry of final preparations. Nora's dress, ordered months ago from a dressmaker in Helena, arrived and fit perfectly. Ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, elegant but practical enough for a frontier wedding. Cole's new suit was delivered from the tailor, dark and well cut, making him look like a prosperous rancher instead of a working cowboy. Eli practiced his best man speech until he could recite it without stumbling, and Mrs. Patterson coordinated the women of Boulder Creek in preparing a reception feast that would feed half the territory. 2 days before the wedding, Nora and her mother sat in the boarding house parlor after everyone else had gone to bed, talking quietly in the lamplight. Catherine held her daughter's hand and asked the question Nora had been waiting for. "Do you have any doubts? Any reservations? It's not too late to postpone if you need more time." Nora considered the question seriously, giving it the weight it deserved. "No doubts about Cole or our future together. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little scared. Not of marriage itself, but of," she struggled to find the words, "of being vulnerable again, of giving someone the power to hurt me. What happened with Barrett and his men, that was trauma inflicted by strangers. But if something happened to Cole, if I lost him, or if our marriage failed, that would be worse because I chose to love him. I chose to open my heart. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Catherine said gently. "Love is always a risk, darling. Your father could have died before I did. He almost did, twice, once from pneumonia and once from appendicitis. Every day we loved each other was a day I risked losing him. And when he finally did die, the pain was unbearable. But you know what? I'd risk it all again in a heartbeat. Because a life lived without love, without vulnerability, without opening your heart despite the danger, that's not really living at all. That's just existing. And you deserve more than existence, Nora. You deserve a life filled with joy and love and, yes, risk. Because that's what makes us human." Nora felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I miss him. Father, I wish he could be here to walk me down the aisle. I know, darling, I miss him too. But he would be so proud of you, of your strength, your resilience, your choice to build a good life from terrible circumstances. And he would have liked Cole very much. I know because I like Cole very much. And your father and I always agreed on what mattered in a person." "Will you walk me down the aisle?" Nora asked. "I know it's unconventional, but so is everything else about this wedding. I want you there beside me when I take this step." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Nothing would honor me more, my darling girl. Nothing in the world." The morning of October 15th dawned clear and cool, the kind of perfect autumn day that made Montana Territory look like something from a painting. The mountains wore their first dusting of snow, brilliant white against blue sky. The cottonwoods along the creek had turned gold, and when the wind blew, leaves rained down like blessings. Nora woke early in her boarding house room, too excited and nervous to sleep. Mrs. Patterson brought her breakfast on a tray. She was too anxious to eat, but managed a few bites to please the older woman. Catherine helped her dress, fastening the tiny buttons down the back of the wedding gown, arranging her hair in an elegant style that was both sophisticated and simple. "You look beautiful," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely radiant. Cole Anders is a lucky man." I'm lucky too," Nora replied, studying herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was different from the one who'd stood on an auction block 14 months ago. That woman had been broken, terrified, stripped of dignity and hope. This woman was whole, strong, ready to claim her future with both hands. The church was packed when they arrived. The whole town turned out to witness the wedding. Nora recognized faces from everywhere, her students and their families, the work crews who'd helped rebuild the ranch, shopkeepers and ranchers and miners, Sheriff Hendricks in his best clothes looking uncomfortable but pleased. Even a few of the working girls from the saloon sat in the back pews, their presence a testament to the respect Nora had earned in Boulder Creek. Cole waited at the altar with Eli beside him, both men looking nervous and proud in their new suits. When Cole saw Nora enter the church on her mother's arm, his face transformed, anxiety giving way to wonder, fear dissolving into love so pure and strong it was almost visible. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. Preacher Morrison kept his remarks brief, speaking about love and commitment and the blessing of finding someone to share life's burdens and joys. When it came time for vows, Cole spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Nora Caldwell, when I met you, you were standing on an auction block, and I was just a man passing through. But something in me recognized something in you, a kindred spirit maybe, or just someone worth fighting for. Since that day, you've taught me what real courage looks like. Not the loud, showy kind, but the quiet determination to heal, to grow, to refuse to let trauma define you. You've made me a better man just by being yourself. And I promise you this, I will spend every day of my life earning the privilege of standing beside you. I will respect your independence, support your dreams, protect you when you need protection, and step back when you need space. I will love you in triumph and in failure, in health and in sickness, in youth and in old age. You belong to yourself, Nora. You always will. But I hope you'll choose to belong with me." Nora's turn came, and she had to pause to compose herself, blinking back tears. "Cole Anders, you gave me back my life when you rode into Silver Creek. But more than that, you gave me back myself. You saw me as a person when others saw merchandise. You believed in my strength when I'd forgotten I had any. You've been patient with my healing, supportive of my ambitions, and you've never once tried to diminish me to make yourself feel bigger. That's rare in any man, but especially in a world that tells men they should dominate and control. You've shown me what partnership looks like, what love looks like, what a good life can be. And I choose you. Not because I need you, though I do love you, but because you make my life richer, fuller, more joyful. I promise to be your partner in all things, your supporter in hard times, your companion in good times. I promise to love you fiercely and honestly, to challenge you when you need it, to comfort you when you hurt. And I promise that no matter what comes, we'll face it together." Preacher Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, and when Cole kissed her, the church erupted in applause and cheers. Nora felt happiness burst through her like sunrise, bright and warm and impossible to contain. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up in the yard under the cottonwoods with food and drink enough for an army. Someone had a fiddle, and someone else had a guitar, and soon music filled the air and people were dancing despite the autumn chill. Catherine danced with Eli, laughing at something he said. Mrs. Patterson held court among the older women, probably taking credit for the entire romance. Sheriff Hendricks actually smiled, and several people claimed to photograph the rare sight. As evening fell and lanterns were lit, Cole led Nora away from the celebration to the porch of their rebuilt house. Inside, the rooms were ready for them, their bedroom, the guest room where Catherine would stay tonight before returning to the boarding house tomorrow, the parlor with its new furniture, their home, their life. "Happy?" Cole asked, pulling her close. "Deliriously," Nora replied. "Though I keep expecting something to go wrong. That's terrible, isn't it? But I've had so many bad things happen that happiness feels almost suspicious." "Nothing's going wrong," Cole said firmly. And even if it did, even if a storm hit tomorrow or the barn burned down again or any of 1,000 disasters struck, we'd survive it, together. That's what marriage means, Nora. Not that life becomes perfect, but that you face imperfection with someone who has your back. They stood together watching their friends and family celebrate, watching the stars emerge one by one, listening to music and laughter drift on the evening air. And Nora thought about the long, strange journey that had brought her here, from Philadelphia's genteel streets to Silver Creek's auction block to this porch in Montana Territory with a ring on her finger and a future stretching ahead like an open road. She thought about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become, about trauma and healing, about fear and courage, about the difference between existing and truly living. She thought about the people who'd helped her along the way, her mother's unwavering support, Eli's gentle strength, Cole's steady belief in her worth. She thought about her students who needed her, about the community that had embraced her, about the harsh, beautiful land that had tested her and found her worthy. "Cole?" she said softly. "Yeah?" "Thank you for everything, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for believing in me when I'd stopped believing, for giving me the space to heal and the support to grow, for loving me not despite my past, but because of who I became through surviving it. Thank you." Cole turned her to face him, his hands framing her face, his ice-blue eyes reflecting the lantern light. "Nora Anders," he said her new name slowly, savoring it. "You never have to thank me for loving you. It's the easiest thing I've ever done. The privilege of my life. And I promise you, the best is yet to come. For both of us. Together." He kissed her then, sweet and deep and full of promise, while around them the celebration continued and the stars wheeled overhead and the future waited like an unopened gift. When they finally rejoined the party, Eli raised his glass in a toast that brought tears to every eye. "To Cole and Nora," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "Two people who've survived more than most of us can imagine and came out the other side stronger for it. Two people who prove that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone perfect for you. Two people who've built something beautiful from ashes. May their love endure, may their joy multiply, and may they always remember that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose to stand with when the world gets hard. To the bride and groom." "To the bride and groom," the crowd echoed, glasses raised high. And as Nora looked around at the faces of everyone she loved, at the home she'd helped build, at the man who'd become her partner in her choice, she felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't felt in over a year. Peace. Complete, absolute, unshakable peace. The past would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She'd survived. She'd healed. She'd chosen to live fully and love deeply despite every reason to guard her heart. The celebration wound down eventually, guests departing in wagons and on horseback, calling final congratulations and blessings. Catherine retired to her room with a knowing smile, giving the newlyweds their privacy. Eli made himself scarce, claiming he needed to check on something in the barn, though everyone knew it was just an excuse. Finally, it was just Cole and Nora alone in their home on their wedding night. They stood in their bedroom, what a wonderful, terrifying thought, and looked at each other with a mixture of desire and nervousness. "We don't have to," Cole started, but Nora stopped him with a kiss. "I want to," she said. "I'm a little scared, but I want to. With you. Only with you." What followed was tender and awkward and beautiful. Two people learning each other, choosing vulnerability, claiming intimacy as healing rather than trauma. And afterward, lying in Cole's arms with moonlight streaming through the window and the sound of the creek singing its endless song outside, Nora finally understood what freedom really meant. It wasn't just the absence of chains or the ability to make choices. It was this, the right to be fully yourself, to love and be loved, to build a life that reflected your values and dreams. It was the confidence that came from surviving hell and choosing not to let it make you bitter. It was the peace of knowing you were exactly where you belonged, with exactly who you belonged with. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Cole replied, his arms tightening around her. "Always will. That's a promise I'll keep every day for the rest of my life." And as sleep finally claimed them both, Nora's last conscious thought was simple and profound. She was home. Not the house, not Montana territory, not any physical place, but this feeling of safety and love and belonging. She traveled thousands of miles and survived unimaginable horrors to find it, but it had been worth every step of the journey. She was home. She was free. She was loved. And tomorrow she'd wake up and start building the rest of her life with the man who'd helped her remember that she was worth fighting for. Tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that. Morning came softly to the AAA ranch, sunlight filtering through the curtains in patterns of gold and shadow. Nora woke slowly, luxuriously, wrapped in warmth and the unfamiliar weight of Cole's arm across her waist. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory flooded back, the wedding, the celebration, the night, and she smiled against the pillow. Mrs. Nora Anders. The name felt strange and wonderful, like a dress she hadn't quite broken in yet, but knew would fit perfectly with time. Cole stirred beside her, his eyes opening to find hers already watching him. "Morning, wife," he said, his voice rough with sleep but warm with affection. "Morning, husband," Nora replied, testing the word on her tongue. "That's going to take some getting used to." "We've got time. All the time in the world." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips, gentle kisses that held promise rather than urgency. "Though we should probably get up soon. Your mother will be wondering if we're planning to sleep all day, and Eli's probably already fed the horses and made breakfast and is waiting very patiently for us to appear so he can pretend he's not curious about how the night went." Nora laughed and swatted his shoulder. "Eli would never pry. Eli wouldn't ask directly, but he'll assess us with those sharp eyes of his and know everything anyway. Man was a scout in the cavalry. He can read tracks that are 3 days old. Reading newlyweds will be child's play." They dressed and emerged to find exactly the scene Cole had predicted. Eli stood at the stove cooking eggs and bacon, trying very hard to look like he wasn't paying attention when they walked into the main room. Catherine sat at the table with coffee and a book, but her eyes lifted immediately to assess her daughter with a mother's knowing gaze. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she smiled and returned to her reading without comment. "Morning," Eli said casually, as if this were any other morning. "Coffee's fresh. Breakfast will be ready in a minute. Sleep well?" "Very well, thank you," Nora said primly, though she could feel the blush creeping up her neck. "Good, good. House is solid. New construction sometimes settles and creaks, but I didn't hear any problems." The absolute innocence in his tone was undermined by the twinkle in his eye. Cole poured coffee for himself and Nora while fighting a smile. "The house is perfect, Eli. Your carpentry work is excellent as always." "Well, I had good help." Eli served up plates of food and they all sat down together. Family, Nora thought, this odd assembled family that had formed from tragedy and choice and love. "So what's the plan for today? I imagine you two will want some time alone, being newlyweds and all." "Actually," Catherine said, setting down her book, "I was hoping we might all spend the day together. I leave tomorrow to return to Philadelphia, and I'd like one last day with all of you before I go, if that's not presumptuous." "Not at all," Cole said quickly. "We'd be honored. What would you like to do?" "I'd like to see this wildflower valley Nora's told me about, the secret place where flowers bloom early. I know it's October and there won't be flowers now, but I'd still like to see it, the place that helped my daughter heal." Cole and Nora exchanged glances. That valley was their place, intimate and private, but sharing it with Catherine felt right somehow. A way of including her in this new life, of bridging the gap between past and present. "We can do that," Nora said. "It's beautiful even without the flowers. We'll pack a lunch. Make a day of it." They set out mid-morning, the four of them on horseback with a basket of food tied to Eli's saddle. The ride up into the foothills was leisurely, the autumn air crisp but not yet cold, the aspens turning gold against the evergreens. Catherine proved to be an excellent rider despite years away from horses, sitting her borrowed mare with the confidence of someone who'd grown up in the country before Philadelphia society had claimed her. The valley opened before them like a cupped hand, the lake in its center reflecting clouds and sky. The wildflowers were long gone, replaced by brown grass and the first hint of winter dormancy. But the beauty remained, stark now instead of lush, but no less profound. "Oh," Catherine breathed, pulling her mare to a halt. "Oh, Nora, I see why you love it. It's like the world is holding its breath here, waiting for spring to come again. They dismounted and walked to the lakeshore, boots crunching on frost-brittle grass. Eli started a small fire and set water to boil for tea, while Cole and Nora showed Catherine around, pointing out where the flowers had been thickest, where they'd first made love, where Cole had proposed. Catherine listened and watched and understood more than was said, the way mothers do. Over lunch, cold chicken and bread and cheese, with hot tea to ward off the chill, Catherine cleared her throat in a way that signaled she had something important to say. "I've been thinking," she began, "about my future, about where I want to spend my remaining years. Philadelphia has been home for so long, but it's also become hollow somehow. All my friends are either dead or diminished by age. The society I once enjoyed now feels frivolous and empty, and my only child, my only family, is here." She looked at Nora with eyes that held both hope and uncertainty. "I know it's a lot to ask, and I don't want to intrude on your new marriage, but I wondered, would you mind if I came back? Permanently? I could buy a small house in Boulder Creek or rent rooms from Mrs. Patterson. I wouldn't be underfoot at the ranch, but I'd be close enough to visit, to know my future grandchildren, to be part of your life in a way I can't be if I'm in Philadelphia." Nora felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Mother, are you serious? You'd really leave Philadelphia? All your memories of father, your whole life?" "My memories of your father live in here," Catherine touched her heart. "Not in a house or a city. And my life is wherever you are, darling. I've realized these past weeks that I don't want to miss watching you build your future. I don't want to receive letters months after important events happen. I want to be here, present, part of the life you're creating, if you'll have me." "If we'll have you?" Nora laughed through tears. "Mother, nothing would make me happier. But are you sure? Montana is harsh. The winters are brutal. Society is nothing like Philadelphia. You'd be giving up so much." "I'd be gaining more," Catherine said simply. "Besides, I'm tougher than I look. I raised you, didn't I? Survived your father's death, managed on a pension that barely covered expenses, navigated Philadelphia society's judgment when we lost our money. I think I can handle Montana weather and frontier manners." Cole spoke up, his voice warm. "Mrs. Caldwell, you'd be welcome here. More than welcome. And if you did want to be closer to the ranch instead of in town, we're planning to expand the house next summer anyway. We could build you a separate cottage on the property, your own space, your own independence, but close enough for family dinners and helping with grandchildren when they eventually come along." "A cottage," Catherine repeated thoughtfully. "With a garden, perhaps? I've always wanted a proper garden, but Philadelphia's climate is difficult." "Anything you want," Cole said. "Montana summers are short but intense. You could grow vegetables, flowers, herbs, whatever your heart desires." Eli added his support quietly. "Be nice having another educated person around, someone to discuss books and philosophy with. Cole and Nora are sharp as tacks, but they're young. You and we've got the perspective of age, could have some interesting conversations." Catherine smiled at him, and something passed between them, understanding, maybe, or the beginning of friendship between two people who'd survived loss and loneliness. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Freeman." "Eli, please. We're going to be family, apparently. Might as well use first names." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the valley, talking and planning, weaving Catherine into their future with the ease of people who genuinely wanted her there. By the time they rode back to the ranch, it was settled. Catherine would return to Philadelphia to arrange her affairs, sell the house, ship her belongings, say her goodbyes, and come back to Montana in the spring. She'd stay with Mrs. Patterson until the cottage was built, then move into her own space on the AAA property. Close, but not too close. Family, but independent. Perfect. That evening, their last before Catherine's departure, they sat around the table long after dinner was finished, talking about everything and nothing, stories about Nora's childhood in Philadelphia, about Cole's youth in Texas, about Eli's cavalry days and Catherine's years as a lawyer's wife. The lamp burned low and the fire crackled, and outside the October wind whispered of winter coming. But inside there was only warmth and laughter and the deep satisfaction of people who'd chosen to become family. "I have something for you," Catherine said to Nora as the evening wound down. She retrieved a small package from her room and placed it in her daughter's hands. "Your father's watch. He'd want you to have it, to pass down to your children someday. It's not much, but it's a piece of where you came from. Don't forget that, darling. Even as you build something new, your past made you who you are, both the good parts and the terrible ones." Nora opened the package with trembling hands. The watch was gold, worn smooth by years of her father's touch, with his initials engraved on the case. She remembered him consulting it constantly, timing his court appearances, always precisely punctual. Holding it now felt like holding a piece of him, a connection across death and distance. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll treasure it. Always." The next morning came too quickly. They drove Catherine to the stage station in Boulder Creek, all of them quiet with the sadness of parting tempered by the knowledge it was temporary. When the stage arrived, Catherine embraced each of them in turn, Eli, Cole, and finally Nora, holding her daughter close. "Be happy," Catherine whispered. "Be brave. Be yourself. And write to me. I want to know everything that happens between now and spring. I will, I promise. And Mother, thank you. For understanding, for supporting my choices, for being willing to change your whole life to be part of mine. That's what mothers do, darling. We love you enough to let you go, and brave enough to follow when you find your way." Catherine pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Now go. Build your life. I'll see you in the spring." They watched the stage disappear down the road, dust rising in its wake. Then Cole took Nora's hand and they walked back to where Eli waited with the wagon. "She's a remarkable woman, your mother," Eli observed. "She is," Nora agreed. "I'm lucky to have her." "We're all lucky," Cole said. "To have found each other, to have survived our various trials, to have built this family from scratch. That's worth celebrating." The winter that followed was harsh but manageable, the ranch weathering the storms and cold with the resilience of good construction and careful preparation. Nora continued teaching through the school year, riding into Boulder Creek 3 days a week and working from home the other 2, marking papers by the fire while Cole did ranch work and Eli maintained equipment and planned improvements for spring. It was a good winter, productive and peaceful. The nightmares that had plagued Nora after Silver Creek came less frequently now, and when they did, Cole was there to wake her gently and hold her until the fear passed. She was healing in layers, discovering that recovery wasn't linear but cyclical. Most days she felt strong and whole, but occasionally the trauma would surface and she'd need to work through it again at a deeper level. Cole's patient understanding made all the difference. He never told her to get over it or accused her of dwelling in the past. He simply held space for her healing while reminding her how far she'd come. In February, news came that Pete Garris and his surviving gang members had been tried and sentenced. 2 hanged, 3 got life in prison. Sheriff Hendricks brought the news personally, probably expecting some reaction from Nora, but she felt only a distant satisfaction. Those men no longer had power over her. They were footnotes in her story, not the main narrative. "How do you feel?" Cole asked that evening after Hendricks left. "Free," Nora said simply. "Barrett's dead, his men are punished, and I'm alive and happy and building a life that has nothing to do with what they tried to do to me. That's the best revenge. Not dwelling on them, but thriving despite them. They wanted to break me, to reduce me to nothing. Instead, I'm a wife, a teacher, a valued member of this community. I won. They lost. That's all that matters." Cole pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "You're amazing. You know that? The strongest person I've ever known." "I learned from good teachers," Nora said, thinking of Cole's steady courage, Eli's quiet resilience, her mother's adaptable strength. "And I had help. No one survives trauma alone. You need people who believe in you, who see your potential even when you can't. I had that. I have that. That's why I survived." Spring came eventually, as it always did, snow melting into rushing creeks and green shoots pushing through brown earth. Catherine arrived on a warm April afternoon, bringing trunks of belongings and an excitement that made her look years younger. She moved into Mrs. Patterson's boarding house temporarily, while Cole and Eli, with help from neighboring ranchers, began construction on her cottage. The building rose quickly through April and May, a small but perfect structure with 2 rooms and a porch, positioned on a gentle rise about 200 yards from the main house, close enough to walk easily, far enough for privacy. Catherine threw herself into planning her garden, consulting with Eli about what would grow best in Montana's climate, ordering seeds from catalogs, sketching elaborate plans for flower beds and vegetable patches. Nora watched her mother's transformation with quiet joy. The refined Philadelphia lady was slowly becoming a Montana woman, still elegant, still educated, but more relaxed, more herself somehow. She traded her elaborate dresses for simpler clothes, started wearing her hair in a practical bun instead of complicated updos, developed opinions about horses and weather and the territorial politics. She and Eli became close friends, spending hours in conversation about books and history and philosophy, their debates lively and their respect mutual. In June, Nora discovered she was pregnant. The realization came slowly. A missed monthly course, morning queasiness, an unusual fatigue. Doc Pritchard confirmed it with his examination and pronounced her healthy and likely to have an easy pregnancy. When she told Cole that evening, his face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, terror, more joy, before settling on something like awe. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Nora asked, suddenly uncertain. They talked about children in the abstract, but the reality was different. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Cole said, pulling her into his arms carefully, as if she might break. "Terrified, yes. Worried about all the things that can go wrong, absolutely. But happy. Nora, you've given me everything. Love, purpose, a future worth fighting for. And now a child? I don't have words for how blessed I feel." When they told Catherine and Eli, the celebrations were immediate and enthusiastic. Catherine started knitting tiny clothes immediately, her needles clicking away while she discussed names and nursery arrangements. Eli carved a beautiful cradle from pine, spending hours in his workshop ensuring every edge was smooth, every joint perfect. The whole ranch seemed to glow with anticipation. The summer passed in lazy contentment. Nora's pregnancy progressed normally, her body changing to accommodate the life growing inside her. She continued teaching through the end of the school year in June, then took the summer off to rest and prepare. Sarah Mitchell, now 13 and more determined than ever to become a doctor, visited often to help and to discuss her plans for medical school back east. Nora encouraged her fiercely, never letting her forget that dreams were worth fighting for. "You're proof of that," Sarah said one afternoon as they sat in the shade of the porch. "You could have given up after what happened to you, could have gone back to Philadelphia and hidden from the world. But you didn't. You stayed and built something beautiful. You're my hero, Miss Caldwell. I mean, Mrs. Anders." "I'm no hero," Nora protested. "I just refuse to let terrible men define my story. That's not heroism. That's survival." "Maybe," Sarah said thoughtfully, "but there's different kinds of survival. Some people survive by hiding, by making themselves small. You survived by becoming bigger, stronger, more yourself. That's heroism in my book." In August, as Nora's belly swelled and moving became awkward, she and Cole took a final ride to the Wildflower Valley. The flowers were in full bloom again, a carpet of color that seemed almost absurdly beautiful. They spread a blanket and lay together in the sun, Cole's hand on her rounded stomach, feeling the baby kick and move. "Boy or girl?" Cole asked, not for the first time. "Does it matter?" Nora replied, also not for the first time. "Not even a little. As long as the baby's healthy and you're healthy, that's all I care about." He paused, then added quietly, "I've been thinking about names. If it's a girl, what about Annie, after my sister?" Nora had been expecting this and had already made her decision. Annie would be perfect. And if it's a boy? Thomas, maybe? After your uncle? Tears filled Nora's eyes. That would honor him well. He died protecting me. Naming our son after him would keep his memory alive. They lay together in the flowers, making plans and dreaming dreams, two people who'd survived terrible things and chosen to build beauty from ashes. Above them, hawks circled on thermal currents. Around them, bees worked the flowers with single-minded dedication. And inside Nora, their child grew, a perfect symbol of hope and futurity and love's ability to create new life even in the aftermath of trauma. September arrived, and with it came labor. It started early one morning, a tightening across her belly that woke Nora from sleep. She lay quiet for a while, timing the contractions like Doc Pritchard had taught her, waiting until they were close enough and strong enough to warrant waking Cole. When she finally did, He went immediately into a controlled panic, simultaneously efficient and terrified, getting her comfortable while sending Eli to fetch the doctor and Catherine rushing over from her cottage. The labor lasted through the day and into the evening, long hours of increasing pain punctuated by Catherine's calm encouragement and Doc Pritchard's clinical competence. Cole stayed by her side the entire time, letting her squeeze his hand hard enough to leave bruises, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement and love and promises that it would be over soon, that she was doing beautifully, that he was so proud of her. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the bedroom, the baby finally came, a girl, red-faced and screaming with vigorous lungs and a full head of dark hair. Doc Pritchard cleaned her and wrapped her in soft blankets, then placed her in Nora's arms. "Say hello to your daughter," he said with a smile. Nora looked down at the tiny face, at the small fingers already grasping at air, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. This was her daughter, hers and Cole's, a new person, innocent and perfect, with her whole life ahead of her. "Hello, Annie," Nora whispered. "Welcome to the world. We've been waiting for you." Cole leaned over them both, his face wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. "She's perfect, absolutely perfect. You're perfect. God, Nora, you're amazing. Bringing life into the world. I've never seen anything more beautiful." Catherine stood nearby with her own tears flowing freely, and even Eli, waiting anxiously in the main room, could be heard letting out a whoop of joy when Doc Pritchard emerged to announce the birth of a healthy girl. The days after Annie's birth passed in a blur of exhaustion and euphoria. Nora learned to nurse, to change diapers, to function on 2 hours of sleep. Cole proved to be a surprisingly natural father, patient with middle-of-the-night crying, gentle in his handling of something so small and fragile. Catherine helped constantly, and Eli carved toys and sang old cavalry songs that somehow soothed the baby when nothing else would. When Annie was 2 weeks old, they held a small baptism at the Boulder Creek Church. The whole town turned out. It seemed everyone wanted to see the baby and celebrate with the family that had become such a fixture in the community. Preacher Morrison blessed the child and spoke about new beginnings and the grace of God in providing hope after hardship. Afterward, at the reception at the ranch, Nora stood on the porch holding her daughter and looking out over the valley that had become home. Cole stood beside her, his arm around her waist. Catherine and Eli were inside with the guests, probably arguing good-naturedly about something inconsequential. The barn stood strong and solid. The house glowed with lamplight and laughter. The mountains rose eternal in the distance. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked softly, not wanting to wake the sleeping baby. "I'm thinking about the journey," Nora said. "About where I started and where I am now. About standing on that auction block in Silver Creek, thinking my life was over, and now standing here with a husband who loves me and a daughter in my arms and a family I chose. It's almost too much to process." "You've come so far," Cole agreed. "Further than most people could have. You took the worst day of your life and refused to let it be your last good day. That takes incredible strength." "Not just strength," Nora corrected. "It took help. It took you riding into that square and saying those words that changed everything. She belongs only to herself. Do you remember?" "Of course I remember. I meant every word then, and I mean them now. You do belong to yourself, Nora. This life you've built, this is yours. I'm just lucky enough to share it." Nora shifted the baby to one arm and took Cole's hand with the other. "No, this life is ours. We built it together. You and me and Eli and my mother and everyone who helped along the way. That's what I want Annie to know as she grows up, that we're stronger together than we could ever be alone. That family isn't just blood, it's choice. And that no matter what terrible things happen, you can survive and heal and build something beautiful on the other side." Cole kissed her forehead. "She'll know. We'll teach her. We'll teach her about courage and kindness and resilience. We'll teach her that she belongs to herself, that she has worth beyond what anyone else says. We'll teach her your story and my story and Eli's story and your mother's story, all the stories of survival and strength that brought us to this moment." Inside the house, someone started playing the fiddle, probably Old Man Henderson, who never needed much excuse to make music. Other instruments joined in, and soon people were dancing despite the limited space. Through the window, Nora could see her mother laughing at something Eli said. could see her students and their families, could see Sheriff Hendricks actually trying to dance with Mrs. Patterson, could see the whole community that had embraced her and become her people. Cole, Nora said. Yeah? I'm happy. Deeply, completely, bone-deep happy. And I know life isn't always going to be this perfect. There will be hard times ahead. There always are. But right now, in this moment, I want to remember what this feels like. To be safe and loved and holding our daughter while our family celebrates inside. This is what I survived for, this moment right here. Then let's stay in it a while longer, Cole said. The party can go on without us for a few more minutes. They stood together in the gathering darkness, watching the stars emerge one by one, listening to music and laughter drift from the house. Annie slept peacefully in her mother's arms, innocent of the story that had brought her into being, the trauma and triumph and transformation that had preceded her existence. She would grow up strong and free. Nora would make sure of that. She would grow up knowing her own worth, claiming her own story, belonging only to herself while surrounded by people who loved her. A year later, Nora stood in almost the same spot holding a second child, a son named Thomas Daniel Anders, born on a cool April morning with his father's ice-blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. Annie, now 14 months old, toddled around the porch with Eli supervising, her laughter bright as bells. Catherine worked in her garden, coaxing vegetables and flowers from the Montana soil with patient expertise. And Cole was in the barn with neighbors, helping shoe horses and discussing the upcoming spring planting. Life had settled into patterns, rhythms of work and family and community. Nora had returned to teaching part-time, bringing both children with her to school where they were collectively spoiled by students who competed for the privilege of holding the babies. Sarah Mitchell had left for medical school in Boston, her departure both heartbreaking and triumphant, proof that dreams could be achieved with determination and support. The ranch thrived under Cole's management and Eli's hard work. Catherine had become a fixture in Boulder Creek society, organizing a lending library and a women's reading group that tackled subjects most frontier towns wouldn't touch. It was an ordinary life in many ways, full of ordinary challenges, teething babies and sick livestock and harsh weather and the constant work required to survive in Montana territory. But it was also extraordinary because it was chosen, claimed, built deliberately by people who'd refused to let trauma define them. On their second wedding anniversary, Cole and Nora rode out to the Wildflower Valley one last time before winter closed in. They brought both children, Annie riding in front of Cole and baby Thomas secured in a sling against Nora's chest. Eli and Catherine came too, making it a family outing, bringing food and blankets and plenty of patience for the slow pace required with small children. The valley was in its autumn phase again, flowers gone, but beautiful in the stark way of approaching winter. They picnicked by the lake while the children napped, talking quietly about the past 2 years and the years to come. "Do you ever think about Silver Creek?" Eli asked Nora. "About that day and everything that followed?" Nora considered the question seriously. Sometimes. Less often now than I used to. When I do think about it, it's different than before. It's not the trauma I remember most clearly. It's Cole's face when he rode into that square. The sound of his voice saying I belonged to myself. The moment I realized I was going to survive. Those are the memories that matter now, not the fear and pain, but the courage and rescue and healing. That's growth, Catherine observed. True healing isn't forgetting the trauma. It's integrating it into your story in a way that doesn't dominate the narrative. You've done that, darling. You've taken something terrible and transmuted it into strength. We all have, Nora said, looking around at her chosen family. Cole lost his sister but found purpose in protecting others. Eli survived slavery and war and created a life of dignity and respect. Mother, you lost your husband and your social standing but rebuilt yourself into someone even stronger. We're all survivors here. That's what binds us. Cole spoke up, his voice thoughtful. I used to think the most important moment of my life was riding into Silver Creek, that everything before was prologue and everything after was epilogue to that single act. But I've realized that's wrong. The important moments aren't singular, they're cumulative. Every day I choose to be a good husband, a good father, a good man. Every day you choose to teach and love and grow. Every day Eli chooses to be here supporting us. Every day Catherine chooses to be part of this life. Those daily choices, that's what builds a life worth living. Spoken like a wise man, Eli said with a grin. "You've come a long way from the angry cowboy who rode into Silver Creek looking for vengeance disguised as justice." "I learned from good teachers," Cole echoed Nora's words from years earlier, and they smiled at each other with the understanding of people who'd grown together. As the sun set and they prepared to return to the ranch, Annie woke from her nap and toddled to the lake's edge, fascinated by her reflection in the still water. Nora watched her daughter, fearless, curious, absolutely certain of her safety and worth, and felt profound gratitude. This child would never stand on an auction block, would never be told she was property, would never doubt that she belonged to herself. That was the gift Nora and Cole could give her, the freedom to be fully human, fully herself, without the weight of trauma or oppression limiting her possibilities. "Thank you," Nora said to Cole as they loaded the children for the ride home. "For what?" "For everything. For riding into Silver Creek. For seeing me as human when others saw merchandise. For patience with my healing. For building this life with me. For Annie and Thomas. For every day and every choice that brought us here. Thank you." Cole took her face in his hands and kissed her with the tenderness of someone who understood how precious and fragile happiness could be. "You never have to thank me for loving you, Nora Anders. It's the greatest privilege of my life, the easiest choice I've ever made, and I'd make it again every single day, forever." They rode home together through the gathering darkness, a family chosen and built and defended with every ounce of courage they possessed. The ranch came into view as the last light faded, lamplight glowing from the windows, smoke curling from the chimney, horses nickering in the barn. Home. Hard-won, fiercely protected, absolutely theirs. That night, after the children were asleep and Catherine had returned to her cottage and Eli had retired to his room, Nora and Cole sat on their porch in the cold autumn air, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars. "Tell me something true," Nora said, a game they'd developed, a way of maintaining intimacy and honesty, even as daily life threatened to make them complacent. "Something true," Cole repeated thoughtfully. "I'm not afraid anymore. For the longest time after Annie died, I lived with this constant fear that everyone I loved would be taken from me. That fear drove me to Silver Creek, drove me to save you. But somewhere along the way, maybe when we got married, maybe when Annie was born, maybe just gradually over time, that fear dissolved. I'm not afraid anymore because I trust that whatever happens, we'll face it together, and that's enough." "My turn," Nora said. "Something true. I forgive them. Barrett and his men, everyone who hurt me or tried to hurt me. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve freedom. Carrying hatred and fear and anger, that's just another way of being imprisoned by them. So I forgive them and I release them from my story. They're footnotes now, not chapters, and that feels like the final step in healing." They sat in silence for a while, processing these truths, honoring them. Then Cole spoke again. "One more truth, the most important one. I love you, Nora Anders. I loved you when I first saw you on that auction block, and I knew, just knew, that you mattered. I loved you through your healing and your struggles and your triumphs. I love you now as the mother of my children, as my partner, as the strongest person I've ever known. And I'll love you when we're old and gray and sitting on this same porch watching our grandchildren play. That love is the truest thing I know. It's the foundation everything else is built on." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, breathing in the familiar scent of him, horse and leather and home. "I love you too," she whispered, "more than I have words for. You gave me back my life when you said I belonged only to myself. But the truth is, I choose to belong with you. Not to you, but with you. As your equal, your partner, your choice, just as you're mine. And that belonging, that chosen, intentional belonging, that's the greatest gift of all." The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal. The mountains stood sentinel in the darkness. The creek sang its endless song. And on the porch of the AAA ranch, two people who'd survived impossible things sat together in perfect contentment, having built from tragedy something beautiful and lasting and true. Years would pass. Children would grow. Challenges would come and be overcome. Sarah Mitchell would become doctor. Sarah Mitchell and returned to Montana to practice medicine. proving that dreams backed by determination could indeed come true. Eli would live to see his 70th birthday, celebrated with a party that drew people from 3 territories. Catherine would publish a memoir about frontier life that would become a minor bestseller back east. The ranch would expand and prosper, eventually spanning 2,000 acres. But the essential truth established on that October night in 1878 when Cole rode into Silver Creek would remain unchanged. Nora Caldwell Anders belonged to herself. She'd claimed that truth in blood and tears and determination. She'd defended it against men who tried to reduce her to property. She'd built a life on it, raised children in it, created a legacy from it. And every year on the anniversary of that terrible day in Silver Creek, she and Cole would ride to the Wildflower Valley and sit by the lake, remembering where they'd been and celebrating where they were. Remembering the woman on the auction block and honoring the woman she'd become. Remembering the cowboy who'd spoken 6 words that changed everything. She belongs only to herself. Those words had been true then. They remain true now. They would be true forever, passed down to children and grandchildren as a family creed, a reminder that freedom was something claimed and defended and cherished every single day. The story that began with terror and trauma ended with love and triumph, not because the trauma was erased or forgotten, but because Nora had refused to let it be the final word. She'd written her own ending, chosen her own path, built her own family, and in doing so, she'd proven something essential, that survival isn't enough. Healing is possible, joy is achievable, and sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, the worst day of your life can be the beginning of the best chapter. She belonged only to herself, and she was exactly where she wanted to be, where she'd chosen to be, standing beside the man she loved, raising children who would grow up free, building something beautiful from ashes. That was her victory. That was her story. And it was just beginning.